Quite the busy time for that gentleman. I think he's going to go far, actually. What was his name?
Tom
something? Yeah.
Yeah, he's that guy from Bosom Buddies, right?
That's right.
Oh, look, they're singing the song and everything. Geppetto, or not Geppetto, Jiminy Cricket. Jiminy Cricket used to be one of my favorite characters. Now that they've made him 3D, I'm kind of horrified.
This is a More Than Just Podcast production.
Welcome to Spock Season 4, Episode 46. My name is Tim Mitchell. I'm in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuline in Mississauga, Ontario.
Greetings.
And we also have Jaime Lopez Jr. on the line in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
United States of America. Alrighty, so let's start off with some fact check. Coriolanus is not a ballet. Coriolanus is an opera, and it's based on a tragedy written by William Shakespeare. Apparently, Coriolanus was a name given to an emperor after some battle at Coriol or something like that. But yeah, and interestingly enough, because I was wondering why they gave the name Coriolanus Snow to the president in the book. But and it's apparently this is late. I shows how much I know about Shakespeare, but apparently it was written late in his life, around the same time as he wrote Antony and Cleopatra, which was also a tragedy, right? And the reason why the Coriolanus is significant, I think, is because he didn't like plebeians, which are the little people, right? And isn't that sort of General Governor, what's his name, President Snow's, doesn't like the little people, right? Does that work for you guys?
That's all right. That'll work.
Works. It's a good connection. All right. And Mark Leonard played the first ever Romulan commander in the Balance of Terror in the original series, Season 1. Later, he played Sarek, Spock's father, on the Journey to Babel, and in 3 films, Star Trek 3, 4, and 6, The Undiscovered Country, right? And I've got a link here in the show notes to the Balance of Terror episode. And the writer on the Ready Room was saying that, in fact, the Balance of Terror was an inspiration for this last episode we watched last week. And Galileo 7, remember I talked about the creation of the shuttle. Galileo 7 it's the 7th shuttle on the Enterprise, the original Enterprise. It made its first appearance, Season 1, Episode 13. And it was apparently Spock's first solo command. So we'll have to watch if he has a solo command in Strange New Worlds, because then we'll have to throw an objection in that one, right? But and they're sent down to investigate this anomaly, another anomaly in space. Imagine that. And they're forced to land on Taurus 3, and they meet up with some really bad giant. At first invisible, you don't really see the menacing people throwing rocks and sticks and stuff at their sort of primitive weapons, right? At the shuttle, and but it wasn't Dr. Mbenga. It was Scotty, McCoy, Spock, and another lady, I didn't get the name of her, and Mr. Boma, who is an astrophysicist, played by Don Marshall. And the reason why he looks familiar to me is because he was one of the key characters in Land of the Giants, which is later a big popular thing, right? So, and Dr. Mbenga was played by Brooker Bradshaw on the original series, and as well as in a couple of episodes, Private Little War and That Which Survives. And I noticed, I went back and watched the beginning of Obi-Wan just to sort of catch up, because I watched the first episode in 2 pieces. I didn't watch it all at once. And there was a black female youngling in the opening scene there, Jonathan, just after the female Jedi gets killed by the Order 66 people. And she's the one that says, "Let's run." And so that could be the connection to our Reva, right? Is her name?
Yeah, I'm 100% convinced that that's the case.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And it's funny, I was thinking about Tashi Station, because now we just go on Amazon and order stuff, right? But back in the 70s, you had to go to Hobby Shop to get your power converters and things like that, right? So I could see why Tashi Station would be a destination for Luke in the 70s. I'm doing air quotes. And I just looked this up just now. Jaime and I were waiting for John. That cousin, Niano Organa, is the name of douchey cousin, played by Ian Inigo, with a umlaut on the end, or not an umlaut, a squiggly on the end there. So I guess it's pronounced in sort of a Spanish way. And then you of something for us, Sean, here.
Yeah, I had mentioned in the last episode we were talking about some of the Star Wars reveals from Celebration, and one of them was that Star Wars Jedi Survivor, the sequel to Star Wars Fallen Order, was coming, and we were talking about whether or not it was going to be available on multiple platforms, where it was going to be whatever. And according to IGN, this week they put out a piece saying that it is going to be next gen only. That is to say, the most recent generation of technology. So PS5, Xbox 867 or whatever they're at now will be the ones that have it. So you will have to get the newest
thing. So resistance is in fact futile, right?
Yes, you will have to have the newest and greatest and fanciest by the time it comes out next year if you want to play the new game. Which,
or alternately not play it.
Or that, yeah.
Alrighty, and then we'll move over to the headlines, and once again, Jonathan's going to rhyme off a couple.
Yeah, so we had done a nice pile of Star Wars Celebration news and notes from our last episode. Of course, Celebration continued past when we recorded, and there was a few more things. So we got 3 more interesting announcements that came out of Star Wars Celebration in California. We got a trailer and a time frame for the new season of Bad Batch. So I think all of us were fans of the first season. It was I thought a really good, strong show, and so really kind of fast-paced, kind of exciting trailer for that one. What did you guys make out of this one?
It's interesting. I was reading something about the making a connection with the resurrection of Palpatine somehow in there. I didn't really see anything that gave, other than his face is in the sort of preview, but just things blow up real good. Looks interesting. I didn't really get much plot points from watching them run around, and they seem a little bit older, or she, the big character, I forgot her name now, seems a little bit older, right?
Omega.
Omega. Oh yes, Omega with the Australian accent.
I think she's a Kiwi, actually.
Kiwi? Okay.
Yeah.
Down under.
Yep. How about you, Jaime?
Yeah, I thought it was a good way to get us hyped. I am sad that it says fall 2022. It's like, come on, cowards, pick a day and just release it that day. It's like, fall's not that far away, guys. We're here in June.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's pretty action-packed trailer. Like they certainly aren't messing around. It's not a slow burn. They kind of throw you in the deep end, which is fun. But I think it'll be interesting. I mean, obviously it was a pretty dynamic first season. This, pretty important plot points in there as far as the overall Star Wars universe, with the destruction of Kamino and just all kinds of interesting stuff in there. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they sort of piggyback off that and sort of head into season 2. But I was surprised how much I liked that series. I wasn't sure what to expect because I didn't love the Bad Batch when they first showed up in Clone Wars. I thought, it was kind of a gimmicky thing to sort of, what if the clones were a little more, different and unique from each other? But they really grew on me in that first season. So I'm excited about this one. I'm looking forward to that show coming back.
And for people like me who have not seen their original stories in Clone Wars, I did not find it necessary to do so. I'm sure it fills in things. I'm sure it elevates some of the things, but I think they did a good job of making it where you could just jump on right there and kind of catch up with what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. And it does fit really well into the timeline. Like you really have a clear sense of where you are and when you are. And yeah, it's good. We also got the reveal of a new series that's coming, a short anthology series following both Count Dooku and Ahsoka, called Tales of the Jedi. Interesting. Tales of the Jedi is the name of a Dark Horse comic series that came out 25 years ago. That was, same idea, sort of an anthology about just these different stories about the Jedi. Not quite the same thing. So for people who think that there's a parallel, I think it's a little different. But again, a nice look at this one that sort of gives us a little bit of more backstory into some of the characters that we haven't gotten a lot of backstory. So it looks like from the clips that they were showing that have been excerpted, they didn't show the I haven't seen a trailer for it. They've just shown like clips people have taken pictures or supplied by Lucasfilm. But 6-part short animated series, and it is going to be split into 2 3-episode anthologies. One follows Ahsoka and one follows Count Dooku when he is the master to Qui-Gon Jinn. And Liam Neeson is going to come back and play Qui-Gon Jinn. Cool.
Did we talk about Ahsoka last week at all?
Yep.
Because I just heard today that they announced the actress who's going to play Sabine, right? Did we talk about that?
That was part of that as well, yeah. The announcement that we didn't talk about her being cast, but they did show the whole trailer last week, but only at Celebration, right?
Oh, okay, right.
They didn't actually release the trailer, but apparently it picks up. So if you've watched Rebels, apparently it pretty much is just Rebels to, like, it is about the quest to find Ezra. Sabine is in the trailer, Hera's in the trailer, Chopper's in the trailer. So
really cool.
If you want to get in on understanding Ahsoka and what Ahsoka is about, you have to watch Rebels. Like, there's just no way around it anymore. You have to watch Rebels. And there was also speculation online. So last week we talked about Skeleton Crew, right? The new series that they announced that is John Watts is going to be creating and directing, of course, from Spider-Man. And there's a little bit of speculation out there that Jude Law, who he will be playing in that, might be what's his name? Admiral Thrawn.
Really?
And it might be about sort of tying into that whole sort of Mandalorian timeline, Ahsoka timeline, Book of Boba Fett timeline. And he might be the sort of casting for the main villain. And if you...
This is Jude Law, you said?
Yeah, if you know Jude Law and you know Admiral Thrawn, you're like, oh, that makes perfect sense.
But I thought didn't he just get another Skeletons? Or is that the same thing we're talking about?
Well, yeah, no, that's the thing, is they're saying maybe he is, because they don't say what he's doing in Skeleton Crew. They just say he is in this show that is about these kids who are trying to sort of, find their way around or whatever. They don't say whether he's the good guy, the bad guy, or anything. So people are sort of speculating that wouldn't he make an excellent Thrawn? And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, they're right. That would be an amazing Thrawn. But so this, again, Star Wars. The last thing that they announced was the second season for Star Wars Visions. So we had obviously talked about Visions on this show, and it was the series that was done in a variety of anime styles that covered all kinds of, different takes on the Star Wars universe, some of it contemporary, some of it classic, and overall pretty neat, just neat ideas of looking at the Star Wars legends and stuff like that a little differently. So I think, again, I'm glad that they're getting more of that. I think it worked.
Cool.
Yeah. Any of these stand out to you guys? Are you particularly excited or interested in any of all this?
No, it's Star Wars.
It's good stuff. I think I like Star Wars Visions because it's pretty snackable. I don't have to feel like, I got to get ready for even a 3-episode, a 4-episode series. It's like, okay, how long is each one? Am I in the mood? It's like, nope. Every story is independent.
Or like an hour and a half too.
15 minutes tops. So if you're taking a coffee break or something, or tea, or eating a sandwich, like, you can just watch one and enjoy yourself and then move on with your life. It's so different from everything else that is, meant to be a movie that's kind of a broader series, or part of a limited series, or a recurring, episodes of TV show. Kind of nice to have something that's just one and done, but a whole collection of them.
That's what I like about Love, Death, and Robots. It's the same sort of thing. It's a short little, and they're all different styles. I mean, I don't think I watched all of the other Visions from the first season, right? So you're right. They're quick little hits of Star Wars, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think all of this sounds really. Again, they definitely are. It's funny because for the longest time, it was like, oh, the new movie. What's the new movie? Oh, every 2 or 3 years, the big movie. They didn't announce any movies. Not one. Not one movie announcement came out of Celebration. They didn't say anything, and yet everyone is in a tizzy over all the things they announced.
Yeah.
Yeah, real change of direction, but a great and welcome one again. If you've
yeah, but I mean, six 1 hours is way better than a movie, really. You know,
I think that's the thing that everyone's coming around to. I mean, this Obi-Wan series, which we'll talk about later in the episode, it was originally planned to be, they were doing those, a Star Wars story, Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and Solo, a Star Wars story. This was supposed to be a Star Wars story. A screenwriter credit on this show is to the guy who was supposed to write that Obi-Wan movie, and it was supposed to be a movie, 2 hours. Well, instead of 2 hours, we're going to get 6 hours. How could that not be better?
Yeah, true. Like, I mean, the budget looks the same. It doesn't look like they've shortchanged anything on the budget, right?
No.
Except that none of the vehicles have wheels. That bothers me, but besides that.
Cheaped out on the wheels, the 20-inch rims.
Exactly.
All right. And again, speaking of Obi-Wan, this one is upsetting. There have apparently been a number of people who have watched the first few episodes of the Obi-Wan series and taken it upon themselves to target the woman who is playing the lead of the third sister, Reva, is an actress named Moses Ingram, and apparently she has been the target of a number of very offensive, racist attacks online after the first 2 episodes came out. And this is one of those ones where the pendulum swings. So all of these monsters online felt the need to target her personally because of her character on the show.
That makes no sense, right?
I mean, this is very reminiscent of what happened to Kelly Marie Tran in with the Star Wars Episode 8 stuff, and I mean, it's just wildly offensive. And again, I think it goes without saying the three of us stand fully in support of Moses Ingram and denounce these idiots who behave this way. But thankfully, the bounce back of that, the pendulum swinging the other way, is that everybody from Ewan McGregor to I saw Anson Mount posted the other day saying the Star Trek universe stands in solidarity with her and denounces this behavior. But really upsetting to see a branch of the fandom. Ewan McGregor was pretty forceful in his comment. He said, "As far as I'm concerned, if you're acting like this, you're not a true Star Wars fan." And I agree. I mean, Star Wars has an unfortunate and a bit of a spotty record when it comes to portraying race, but there's no excuse. There's no excuse for any of this. It's just unconscionable to treat somebody like that, and anyone, let alone a performer like this. So, but yeah, just like shocking that I don't know what goes through people's heads that they equate these things and are like, well, I can treat somebody like this because of the anonymity of the internet. But then
there's that whole you're ruining my country nonsense going on right now in the States, right? So I mean, it's spreading into all kinds of crazy places where the whole replacement theory, right? So let's not even go there, but still.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm glad that the pendulum has swung back on it. I'm glad that so much of the fandom has embraced her. I think her performance so far has been quite good, and I think that she deserves nothing but respect for what she's doing, and I hope that continues. Part of the celebration was also they were talking about the Willow series, the Star Wars Celebration, because it's a Lucas film project. And we were talking last week about whether or not Val Kilmer as Mad Mardigan may or may not appear based on his health. Obviously, Val Kilmer himself, who played the part famously in the 1980s, has had throat cancer and is having difficulty speaking. And there was a little sort of cryptic, he's part of it, he's not part of it. And this week we finally got the definitive, he is not part of it. Like, that is to say, he is not actually appearing in it, but what they seem to be saying is that his sort of legacy of his character is very strongly felt in this. So he is not actually in it, but his spirit of his character is very much in it. So I didn't see how it was logical, obviously, given the impairment that Val has unfortunately had happened to him as a result of his cancer. But But it makes sense, and I'm glad that they're going to honor the character, because Matt Mardigan was such a wonderful character. For the people who have enjoyed that fantasy story all these years, he's just so much fun.
Yeah, definitely, he was part of the whole B plot of the story for sure. Like he did carry it along quite a bit. So
yeah,
I mean, yeah, we might talk about him later, but yeah, we'll. Jaime and I might talk about him later. All right. And so this one came out last week, and I just happened to be poking around. I won't tell you what I was searching for on the internet, but this popped up, and I thought it was kind of interesting. This is a list that came out last week, the 45 best sci-fi TV shows and movie podcasts. And guess who's in number 20, I think it is?
Number 19.
What? 19.
Moving up.
Yeah, 19. Yeah, so Spockcast is number 19 on this list, which means that's kind of cool. I mean, could be part of our change of providers. We're getting more exposure now, and we have more listeners. But yeah, so what is it? I don't know what the F and the 28 mean, but they say one episode per day. Well, that's interesting, because we're not doing one episode per day. We barely do one per week. But yeah, and apparently we started in September 2017, so we've been out there for a while, right? Oh, and they've got Toronto and Seattle, Jaime. You get a shout out there. How about that?
What?
Cool.
Mississauga? What?
Where? What? Yeah, there's no Mississauga on here.
Oh,
what do you know? I know, eh?
Scandalous.
So underwhelmed. Oh, well. Yep. Were you surprised to hear that what was the show that was filmed in
Strange New Worlds, yeah.
Yeah, Strange. Is that the one? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I knew they were doing that because they obviously they started doing the filming of that during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And part of it was that they started filming it at the studios that are up closer to the airport. And of course, in a weird misnomer,
technically Mississauga
is where the large Toronto International or Pearson Airport.
It's the Pearson International Airport.
Yeah. Right? So, it was a little bit surprising that that was the case, but I know that it makes a lot of sense too. Although again, if you think about it, if you're working on Discovery, you get to be just adjacent to downtown Toronto, and if you're working on Strange New Worlds, you have to be up near the airport. I think you kind of win if you're working on Discovery.
Yeah, true.
Not a lot of outside of the only airport strip clubs and weird stuff like that. There's really not much up in that neighborhood. It's a little industrial.
Yeah, but they can jump on a plane, show up, and all that kind of stuff. Cool. Over to you, Jaime.
So Apple TV Plus is going to get a live action Speed Racer production. So J.J. Abrams is executive producing. And I don't think they have a director attached. It's a very short story. I'm looking. We got showrunners from Westworld and Snowfall. Apparently, this 60s anime series is going to continue going on.
Well, didn't they do a Jesse Pinkman Speed Racer movie?
The Need for Speed, I think, was the one he was in.
Was that Need for Speed? Okay, that wasn't this thing?
No,
I've never watched Speed Racer. I don't know. I don't have any context. That Japanese anime guy who runs around in a white car. How that works?
Yeah. With he's always in battle with the mysterious Racer X, and it's interesting how this anime series has influenced a whole bunch of things that people are not really aware of. Who is this mysterious racer or who is this mysterious villain and their relationship to me. If you go to the video games area, it's Mega Man and Proto Man, and we're talking way back in the Nintendo Entertainment System days, the Famicom days. It's in retrospect, I'm like, oh, that's exactly Speed Racer. Not about racing, but they set up that relationship exactly the same way between those two characters. So, kind of like Scooby-Doo or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or something, Batman, this sort of stuff, I think is pretty iconic and classic. So even if, hopefully this does well, and if it doesn't, just wait it out. It will be a reboot or another try, 14 years hence.
So It's funny because they did do the live action movie. I don't know, Jaime, if you've seen that one. The Wachowskis
did casually. It's a weird one. It's
a very weird one. It's an extremely weird one. Yeah, I mean, so it wasn't the next thing that they did after The Matrix. They did Matrix, then they did V for Vendetta, and then Invasion, and then Speed Racer. But it's if you sort of look at the descending list of the Wachowski career, where it's like, oh, they did The Matrix and Matrix Reloaded and all these, they're making huge money, and then V for Vendetta, oh man, it's a little bit less, and then Invasion makes a lot less, and then it's Speed Racer, and it just keeps declining from there. Cloud Atlas, Jupiter Ascending, which was horrible.
They did all those movies. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Interesting that this was sort of part of their legacy, and it's really kind of a forgotten part of their legacy that they worked on this one. That's the last thing I think I've seen of Speed Racer, and that was 2008. So yeah.
Like M. Night Shyamalan, they suffer from the reverse career where you would kind of want their first film to be the last thing they did, and they go out on a high note. Whereas you knock it out of the ballpark with that very first one, and it's hard to hit that level time and time again.
For sure.
So Disney is still drunk with power when it comes to making live action versions of classic Disney properties. The next one in line here, premiering on Disney Plus September 8th, is Pinocchio with Tom Hanks as Geppetto. It's we were talking before the show about Jiminy Cricket being a little odd, but probably a better design than trying to go realistic and natural, like the Lion King characters. So I give him props for that. I kind of think that this one might work because Pinocchio necessarily has an uncanny valley aspect to him, right? No telling if they'll stick the landing when, spoilers, Pinocchio becomes a real boy at the end of the story. But for the wooden puppet come to life, I'm like, a little bit of not quite there would actually kind of work well for a realistic take or a live action take on Pinocchio.
Yeah, it's funny, all these sort of moral stories that they told in the old days. I think this was Italian, right? Obviously with the name, but like the whole idea of trying to get kids to stop lying. You know what I mean? Like, and having them go through all these trials and horrors and stuff like that, trying to get kids to stop eating candy and Hansel and Gretel and things like that, right? It's funny how these stories get, Disney gets a hold of them and they become wholesome and clean and like that, and they really are horror stories.
But then, of course, that can backfire too. Did you guys see when Winnie the Pooh was announced last week as going into the public domain?
Oh yeah.
Oh. So,
did somebody do like a trailer, like a serial killer Winnie the Pooh?
100% that on day one. There was I think it's called Blood and Honey. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. So basically, the deal is that the A.A. Milne Winnie the Pooh is now in the public domain, not the Disney version. So you can't portray him wearing the little red shirt. There's certain things you are not allowed to do based on their interpretation of Winnie the Pooh. But Winnie the Pooh, the name, and the overall the A.A. Milne books are in the public domain. So as soon as it hit that, the trailer dropped online of this, like what looks like a horror or a slasher movie with Winnie the Pooh, this giant, this full-size man in a Winnie the Pooh costume. It's horrifying. But it's immediately where again, Pinocchio is not a Disney property, but Pinocchio's been done for hundreds of years, right? It's an old Italian fable.
Yeah, exactly.
But of course, everybody's remembers the Disney one the best because it was a masterpiece of animation for its time, and even to this day is still an incredible piece of animation. But it's just these things can backfire so quickly.
I do wonder if modern Disney is willing to do what I think is correct for the Pinocchio character. So when he's on Pleasure Island, I think he has to drink and smoke. And I know it would be controversial. Yeah. It was like, well, but like kids shouldn't do that. It's like, exactly. That's exactly the lesson that the little puppet needs to learn of, like, these are called vices for a reason. Drinking and smoking are not good things. We can have arguments about whether adults should do them, but very clearly children should not do them. And therefore Pinocchio should learn that you shouldn't do this thing.
Yep.
He eats cake too.
that's kind of a lesser vice.
All right, okay. So we condone cake, but not cigarettes, right?
I mean, I guess it's
Right.
in quantity, right? Because if it goes to like the gluttony standpoint, then we're starting to talk about 7 deadly sins, right?
Yeah.
Well, all right. Back to Jonathan for some story.
Yeah, so we talked. The reason we were talking about Coriolanus, right, is that the Hunger Games prequel is being cast, and of course Coriolanus Snow is the president, played by Donald Sutherland in the trilogy, and so we were talking about that, and lo and behold, more news from District 12. So the prequel, which I think they're still calling Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is the name of the book that's based on. Rachel Ziegler is going to play the lead in that, and she, of course, was in the West Side Story, the Steven Spielberg version that came out at the end of last year, and got a lot of acclaim for that. So apparently she is going to be playing the Lucy Gray Baird, who is as the sort of female protagonist of that one, and is going to run afoul of Coriolanus Snow, who is going to be played by Tom Blythe. So now we have an idea of who we're going to see, and now we just need to have them actually make this movie. It's supposed to be out in November 17th, 2023. So we'll see how much we remember about this, and by the time it comes around to actually being released.
Yep. She's playing, I guess, the Natalie Wood character in West Side Stories, or Natalie Wood role.
I must admit I haven't seen the new West Side Story adaptation.
Yeah, neither have I. Is it on Disney, or I forget?
I don't know. It is a Disney.
Have to ask Jaime. Jaime, have you been cleaning the house and watching West Side Story?
I have not. Who has that on stream? I guess I got to check that link. I should have bookmarked the one that Tim.
I thought it was Disney Plus initially, because it came out as you could buy it and then you could watch it, right?
I don't think it was like that in the States. So I gotta dig up that link. I should have bookmarked it. Instead, I gotta dig it out of our own show notes. The one where you said, you can plug in the name and figure out where it's streaming in your area.
Okay, all right. We were talking about this movie last week because of the number of theaters it was in.
Yeah, speaking of streaming, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is coming to Disney Plus on June 22nd, and I did not check. Is that across the world here that has Disney Plus?
Yeah, I saw anything that says here in Canada as well.
Okay, good. So this is a little bit beyond the 45-day window, I think. Right? 45 days would have been the first week of June.
Yep.
Not by much, but pretty close.
Cool.
Without getting too spoilery, because I haven't seen this, I was looking at the schedule and said, okay, I think Miss Marvel comes out in next week.
Yep.
Is that timing bad? Like, should I avoid the first week or two of Miss Marvel prior to watching the Multiverse of Madness?
Not at all.
Okay, perfect. So they knew what they were doing when they timed it out.
Yeah.
Cool.
And just a quick pickup off of the release dates thing. Jaime, you had mentioned in a recent episode that the new Fantastic Beasts movie was coming to HBO Max before the long weekend. I do not know when it dropped, but I noticed today when I went to log in to watch Strange New Worlds that it is available on Crave here in Canada already. So I think
a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I think timing wise, I think it was roughly the same. I think you got it this week, right?
We got. I didn't actually watch it this long weekend, but it was the 30th, May 30th.
It's on Crave for us, right, John?
Yeah, I think it just dropped like maybe 2 days ago.
Yeah, I remember seeing it. I was watching something else on that.
Yeah, so that's good. I'm looking forward to watching it. Anyways, I wasn't going to venture out of the house for that one, but I'll watch it for sure when it's on the streaming service I already pay for. So.
Well, you can get a couple of chairs and push them together and pretend you're on an airplane.
Do I have to sit like really close to it and like put a low rumble in?
Savior sit in front of you. You can kick his chair or something like that.
Yeah,
microwave a TV dinner from a dollar store and drink your water in a tiny cup. Yeah,
for sure.
Recreate that experience.
Offer to babysit one of the neighborhood children who can scream and kick your chair. Yeah,
the most colicky baby that you can find. Yeah, exactly.
Well, you guys are making me really want to get back aboard an airplane again.
Did I ever tell you I actually was on a flight with a Tickle Me Elmo doll? Like when those came out?
No.
It was just horrible. Anyway, so we're at the main part of the show where we start talking about the features of the week, and this week we're talking about we're doing some Star Wars in a bit, but first we're going to talk about Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, Season 1, Episode 5, Freaky Friday. Spock Amok. All right, and I think Jaime's going to do a recap.
Yeah, we start out with Spock on the planet Vulcan, presumably in a wedding ceremony with T'Pring, and I feel bad making an aside within the first sentence here, but man, the design on that outfit, like I had to sort of double check of like, is she wearing something or did they CGI it on? Because it was like painted onto her. I was like, wow, I have not seen the 60s show in a long time. I don't remember it being quite so much. And they definitely had a lot of, body parts exposed everywhere for a 60s show. But nevertheless, this is a case where, Spock is now a filthy human with blunt ears, and T'Pring has chosen violence. He's got to fight. He says, well, who am I supposed to fight? And it's pointy-eared Spock. And we get that classic music that is just, chef's kiss to your ears. And round ear Spock, our hero, he dies. He loses the battle, but thankfully he was just a nightmare. Right? One day
he even gets the gash across his chest, which is what Kirk got when he was fighting Spock in the original Amok time.
Yeah. It's the music. Honestly, the scene was made by the music. It just,
for sure.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they're definitely keying into a classic thing where the Jim Carrey, the cable guy, had that. He was like dun 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 dun, dun when they're at the Camelot show or feast. The medieval times kind of show. So it was great to see it here. We learn that the USS Enterprise has returned to Starbase 1 for repairs, rest, and relaxation after their encounter with the Gorn in the previous episode. Spock reunites with T'Pring in his quarters, and she just immediately does not approve of his bachelor pad because it's too human for a Vulcan, which isn't sitting too well for his... if you haven't figured out from the nightmare... Spock is struggling with do I measure up in a Vulcan sort of way?
And the best line she says is when he's criticizing his apartment for looking too human and to, not being what a proper Stark Vulcan would have, and he says, well, I'm redecorating. She says, well, I'll reserve my comments for when you're finished redecorating. Otherwise, she's going to come and lay into him anyway, right?
It's so funny because this whole thing is framed around logic, but it's also weirdly passive aggressive. Yeah,
totally.
Like the arguments that they're having, but with like complete straight faces, is just it's painful.
You work too much, and you're not paying attention to me. Exactly.
Yeah,
and that is sort of the central thing that they start out with, right? That like T'Pring wants Spock to reprioritize their relationship. That Spock is a darn workaholic, and this will bite him several times in this episode. But I guess we're going to call it our A story because we've got an A, B, and C story. C story? Yeah. There's like a D story, but let's stick with the primary three. The kind of thing that the crew is going to be generally doing, Pike in particular, is there's this situation with the Rongovian Protectorate, which sits between Klingon and Romulan space. And it's the fastest route through the Beta Quadrant, as Admiral Robert April tells us, right? Negotiations have not gone well for trying to negotiate, allyship or at least, secure passage through this area. The Rongovians bring along an old solar ship for ceremonial duties where they will fly the flag of their new negotiated ally should things go well. Otherwise, I guess they slowly go home or get a tugboat to come out and grab it. They didn't really talk about the downside of what happens when the negotiations don't work. But these folks are also sort of weird because they just show up kind of unannounced, right? And Captain Vaso and Brax show up. They meet Robert April, the Admiral, and say, nope, guess what? We only speak to Captain Pike because that's who we were appointed to see, right? And they're just kind of really brisk with their movements here. Brax has noticed Spock's pointy ears. He's like, oh, Volca, really into logic, right? yep, that's what we do. And then immediately they kind of tear into the whole idea of like, so how does this like democracy thing works? You all come together and vote on this stuff? Like, don't you lose direction? Don't you kind of lose self? That's not the way we do things in the Rogovians, that is. So that's kind of setting up our second big story. The sort of collective seas story, which I might call it there, is, the crew getting a little bit of, semi-shore leave. It's not go to Ryza shore leave. It's like, hey, guess what? You can go hang out on this planet, do some stuff. So Nurse Chapel and Lieutenant Ortega's, they meet up with Dr. Mbenga in sickbay. Everyone was getting ready to explore the heavenly bodies on shore leave or go fishing. Just kind of depends what your jam is. But we learned that Lieutenant Singh and number 1 Una are apparently known as where fun goes to die. So nobody expects them to do anything cool or interesting. They're going to go, reconfigure the warp coils and, scrub out the, replicator matter synthesizers. What do they call it in this era? Synthesizers?
Synthesizers, yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we're not supposed to learn about this, way that other people think of them. So it's like, hey, Chief Kyle, beam them the heck out of there because it's getting real awkward. So that's setting up our collective sea story for the crew doing nutty things in shore leave. In this case, we now run across Spock, who we know was sort of, ambushed by the negotiations, and he shows up for dinner late. And guess what? His lady has gotten upset because that's what people do, right? And they show the food that she had made for dinner. I'm like, okay, she had to put some effort to figure it out, but like the synthesizer did it, right? It's not the same as like being over a stove, but
it's traditional. It's traditional, and it's a romantic dinner. I mean, that's the point, right? So
yeah.
And it looked pretty good. Actually, looked pretty entertaining, like pretty appetizing.
Yeah,
in a weird sort of Vulcan way.
If your significant other is supposed to come home at a particular time from work and you've ordered Uber Eats, it's still the effort that you put forth is like, hey, what the heck? Like, why didn't you tell me you weren't coming? Right? And I don't feel respected as a romantic partner. So Spock's digging himself a hole here. Down on the planet, I think, right, is where this restaurant is. Is that where this planet is? I lost track of where Nurse Chapel was at. I don't know if she was on the station or she was on the planet. Do you guys know?
But she's meeting up with this guy that she's sort of been casually seeing, right?
Yeah.
She was doing the girlfriend sort of like Ortegas was saying. Do I leave my communicator on? Do I buzz you? Do I red alert or something? Like, how do you want me to break this up when it goes badly? Kind of the deal. The wingman sort of thing, right?
Exactly. And Nurse Chapel had wanted to go in just as casual. It's just having fun, but this dude is like not getting the hint about she clearly wants to knock boots, right? He's like, hey, I want to eat. She says, no, let's just get out of here. He's like, no, I kind of want to eat their salamanders or oysters, whatever it is that he had said. and he starts talking about this serious relationship, and he is not on the same page as her. So there's some issues there. You've separately got the instead of number 1, which I wrote in my notes, I'm going to say Una. So Una and Lieutenant Singh talk about their nickname, and they're like, what's up with that? Had you ever heard this? No, I hadn't heard this. Like, I'm kind of not terribly bothered by it. Like, I really don't care. And at that point, someone has apparently been breaking into secured access areas, so they go with their guns ready to pew, 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 whoever it is. But it turns out it's just some crew members, and specifically, it's some really dumb ensigns. And we'll come back to this one, because we're back at the restaurant with Nurse Chapel and Spock chatting at the restaurant, talking about his really dumb relationship moves, just giving him some advice. And he apparently decides to take this advice and say, you know what? Let's do this Vulcan soul sharing ritual to understand.
Well, before you get back to that, so Nurse Chapel, when Spock is being dumb about the relationship, she whacks him across the forehead, to kind of wake him up out of his dumbness, right?
Yeah, it gets real. Everyone chooses violence in this episode. It's kind of a theme here. Yeah. You're right, she does. So Spock wants to do Vulcan soul shearing ritual, understand each other's point of view. It should be a pretty straightforward thing, but then using Tim's comment here, Freaky Friday happens. They're like, oh no,
yeah,
our Katras have swapped. We're in each other's bodies now, and we can't undo it. So that's not great. Complicating matters is the fact that Admiral April tells Captain Pike, like, guess what? The Rongovians are unhappy. They want to cancel all future meetings because they don't feel that there is a connection. Kind of was able to convince them to hang around, but they don't want to talk to you, Mr. Pike. They want to talk to Spock. And this leads us into Spock and T'Pring hijinks, where they sort of try to pretend that they're the other person using completely the wrong terms and tone. Pike is a little weirded out, and he encounters them in their in Spock's quarters, and they end up spilling the beans. And he kind of takes this as a joke, a little bit oddly in stride, and then sort of goes with like, I kind of need this done, buddy. Like, regardless of what's going on here. Mm-hmm. So Spock, who's actually T'Pring, will fill in at the negotiations as they choose.
Now, we talked about the sort of casual nature of them referring to each other, because she obviously calls him Chris, whereas Spock calls him Captain, and I thought it was really interesting the way the two actors acts like the female actress. Like, he takes on her mannerisms, and then she takes on his mannerisms, and she starts calling. She initially calls him Captain, like in Spock in the Woman's Body says Captain, and then corrects and says Chris. And so it's kind of like we commented on the fact that, Christopher Pike called Ortega's Erica last week, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this strange casual behavior, and
but here,
Admiral Bob.
Exactly, but here it would make sense that, like, you know what I mean, like that T'Pring would call him Chris, but Spock would call him Captain, right? And that's sort of in the giveaway when you're sort of like, in case you weren't paying attention to the last 10 minutes, that they've actually changed bodies, right?
Yeah.
You know, like, it wasn't super obvious that Ethan Peck was holding his hands in the way that Pring was when she was standing there, right? Kind of thing. Unless you really looked for it.
Yeah, good pickup there. Always fun when somebody has to pretend to be a character, pretending to be another character.
Yeah, I love how meta they are about the hijinks, right? Like, they call it right out so that you're immediately like, oh, Freaky Friday, oh, hijinks, and they're like, hijinks. Yeah. You're like, okay, or you're in on the joke, right?
Yeah, that is, as an aside, the meta for this show is that they kind of seem to appreciate it, like, yep, that's just called being in Starfleet. It's just Thursday.
Yeah.
Space anomaly,
this kind of thing
people swapping bodies. Somebody came back from the dead. That's just Thursday.
This is typical shore leave on one of these, and this is what this one is. This is the shore leave episode for this one. I mean, like, we had what was that doll that Riker gives?
Oh, the Horgon,
the Horgon, and then you've got the episode where McCoy gets killed trying to save a damsel in distress and all that kind of stuff. Those ones, and then he shows up with the Playboy bunnies, right? Yeah. Carry on.
Back over to Una and Lieutenant Singh. They are seen calling dibs on who gets to be the good cop versus the bad cop, and they both want bad cop because they're going to interrogate these dumb ensigns. It is actually kind of funny to see them handling things very differently. The bad cop, Lieutenant Singh, is just like destroying the one ensign emotionally, whereas Una's like, hey, how's it going? You need something to drink? It's okay. You're kind of laughing and enjoying. Turns out these ensigns were caught participating in Enterprise bingo, and they say here that all they needed to finish out the bingo was just signing the Scorch, which will come up later in this episode, but it leaves us with some fun stuff. So if you recall, T'Pring, which is actually Spock, is just supposed to hang out in Spock's quarters, and unfortunately gets a phone call intended for the real T'Pring, and they're like, hey, we really need you to take care of this. It's like a Vulcan criminal dude. Not terrorist is the wrong guy. It's like an anti-establishment guy who, like, they don't believe in logic, or at least they don't slavishly follow logic, right? I forget what they call themselves, but they're an offshoot of the normal Vulcan society. They're like, hey, we need you to fill in and help with this guy.
Well, they do say he led an uprising, so he is not a good guy.
Yeah, and they're trying to get him to turn himself in, right?
Yeah.
I know she can capture him, sort of thing.
We swap back over here and learn that the Enterprise bingo game is a game played by ensigns and lower ranking, which I'm guessing cadets, maybe non-commissioned folks. I don't really know how Starfleet's ranking.
Yeoman.
Yeoman. Oh, okay. Yeah, possibly. So the people who never have fun say, well, let's figure out what's going on here. What's the big deal? So they decide to play the game, which they don't go through the entire thing, but we are given a hint of a handful of things. So the first thing up is to chew bubble gum, until the flavor goes away, and then see if the flavor returns after you go through the transporter. Which is like, that should horrify people who have like, wait a minute here. Are you sure it's me that comes back? Because I don't think this gum came back.
It's the murder machine I was telling you about.
You telling me that somebody made this thing beam in flavor? Where does the flavor come from, Bob? Where does the flavor come from? The second thing is for them to do some sort of like quick draw challenge of like, who can go. They both go into the turbo lift and they tell the computer simultaneously different destinations, and apparently the winner is whoever the computer decides to listen to. So, kind of a weird one. Right. The more,
I don't know why that's part of bingo. I'd have done that every time I got into a lift.
Yeah, for sure.
Just troll it, just doing career limiting moves with the senior officers where they're about to say bridge, you're like lower decks. It's like, oh, are you serious, bro? Just staring at you as you go all the way down and then all the way back up to the bridge.
Sorry, Captain Pike, we're going for a ride.
The more traditional quick draw thing they do is apparently a duel with phasers, with each set on the lowest setting, which I guess stings at that setting. Phasers are set to mildly annoying, I suppose.
I'd like to see that in an actual like combat situation. Somebody forgot to turn their phaser up, and they're just like, "Ow, that stings."
Yeah. And of course, Una gets shot by Lana, and because she says, "Wait," this is as Lana shoots her. So.
Yeah. Not a good moment to have second thoughts.
We do end up with Lieutenant Ortegas and Nurse Chapel on the campgrounds talking about these relationship troubles, and like, oh, they kind of don't want to be around T'Pring because they kind of know a bit of what's going on with Spock, but not the fact that this is actually Spock in T'Pring's body. He shows up to talk to Nurse Chapel, tell her what happened, right? And it will become kind of interesting to see how this plays out, but we do switch back over to Spock, who's actually T'Pring going through the negotiations with the Rungovians, and it's not necessarily going that well, right? Because they start talking about like, hey, does the Federation suppress the cultures within, right? You're here as a Vulcan, you're one of many voices. Do you become less Vulcan essentially by participating?
And you brought your human pet with you, sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah. And so Captain Pike, interjects, which he's not supposed to, because the human folks were, per the Rungovians' request, at this point only allowed to be there in the negotiations as quiet observers. But Pike interjects here to just, hype up Spock of like, no, this is actually, how important you are in dealing with this whole thing and mixing of the culture. Like, this is part of being in the Federation, right? It's not a suppression. It's a celebration of these things. And Rungovians are impressed by Pike standing up for his crew. So it seemingly appears to be going well. We do get a weird, very quick scene of Dr. Mbenga fishing. I mean, he just looks like he's having a good time. No complaints there, but I don't think it led to anything. It was just kind of him. Just him.
I think it just establishes fishing. That everybody's enjoying things differently in this beautiful, the biosphere, right?
Yeah, exactly. So as we had talked about, T'Pring, who's actually Spock, brings Nurse Chapel along as a, the sort of gist of how they're going to explain. It's like, oh, this is my human companion to help in the negotiations with Barjan, the Vulcan separatist terrorist kind of dude. Barjan immediately throws Spock's half-breedness in T'Pring's face of like, that's messed up that you're marrying this guy who's, or going to marry this guy who's like not even real Vulcan. And just ends up Vulcan lodging your face as a way to choose violence to solve this problem. Just talking about, I was like, oh, well, I guess he doesn't need to turn himself in now. Just tie him up and bring him in, lasso him. We do end up with Dr. Mbega and Nurse Chapel having Spock and T'Pring in sick bay, trying to fix the Katras. I didn't quite catch the reference because Dr. Mbega says, oh, this goo that he's spreading on them.
Some sort of mud. It's very close to, the mud consistency is very close to Vulcan skin, so that when they stick the little probes in, it makes a good interface. It's kind of like the stuff you put on, the CPU paste you put on the top of a CPU, so the heat sink, transfers the heat correctly, kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, but he makes some statement that like, oh, this will be standard in the future, and I said, wait, is that a reference to something? It went over my head as to what he's talking about.
Oh, I don't know.
And
then
they do it all the time.
Was like, no way. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't recognize what it was they were talking about there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she says you've been dying to try this since you brought it in. He was saying, like, he was looking for a use for this stuff, right?
Yeah. He was excited by the goo, the putty. We do end up with Spock, talking again to Nurse Chapel, thank you for the help, and he does end up going over to T'Pring and opens up to her about his fears about not measuring up as a Vulcan, because as a half Vulcan living on Vulcan, any time that he deviated in any way from what is typical, that was considered evidence of like, oh, because he's not really Vulcan, right? And from T'Pring's side, she opens up to Spock about her fears that he's only with her as part of dutiful obligation, and not because he necessarily wants to be her partner, right? Just from the beginning of this episode, kind of a big deal around like, hey, you got to show up, you got to put in the work, you got to put down the job work and focus and prioritize your partner.
Oh, Jaime, so many dirty jokes that spin out of that, considering the next scene.
Which is why I said in my notes here, I wrote down that Spock decides that, it's my duty to please that booty.
Yeah.
And, they cut to another scene there as they enjoy their...
Oh, wait, are they married already?
No, they're betrothed.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that doesn't stop them, I guess. Okay, all right.
Yeah. Vulcans are a little bit more loose when they feel like
they're sharing Katras again, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd like to circle back to that one after you finish your recap, Jaime. The conversation about casual sex amongst Vulcans.
So to get the sort of the end cap for what did I call it? The B story, right? The negotiations. Captain Pike says that to the Rungovians, and Admiral April is like clearly losing it. He's like, oh God, what is he doing? He comes straight out to Rungovians and he's like, let me tell you why you shouldn't become our allies. We just finished a war with the Klingons. Romulans are just chilling out. Nobody knows what they're going to do. And given our history, who knows who will be fighting the next time? So you're kind of hitching your wagon to kind of an unstable set of folks. So I'm just being straight up with you. And that ends the negotiations. It doesn't necessarily seem like it went well, but Pike explains to Robert April, is like, hey, I think when we noticed that the Rungovians were rude to the Tellarites, who are known to be rude, they were reasonable with us, which feels very humble brag of like, hey, humans are really reasonable, right? That's our stereotype. And the Vulcans are very logical, and they were very logical with the Vulcans, and so seem to figure out that what they wanted is for others to see things not from the I want something out of you perspective, but from the Rungovian perspective. So it seems like the fact that they're flying the Federation flag, which we established at the beginning of the episode, is evidence that they're cool with your negotiations. They're celebrating there. Rungovians just really wanted somebody to be straight up and not blow smoke up my butt sort of thing, right? Like, you're just being straight up of the situation, and Pike laid it out. Like, this is why you shouldn't do it. So if you choose to do something with us, that's cool, but you're not going to do it because we're trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Finishing off Una and Lieutenant Singh's little arc they've apparently finished most of the, or all of the Enterprise bingo, with the exception of signing the Scorch, which they decide to do in kind of the most dangerous possible way of like, don't use, a spacesuit. Let's just set up a force field and kind of hope it will hold so we can walk on the hull over to the area that has the oldest unreplaced piece of the USS Enterprise hull, where everybody goes and scribbles their name there. So they do that, they complete the task, and they see the beautiful solar sail ship taking off. So kind of a nice bit there. We do get Spock and T'Pring in bed post, happy time. They're cuddling now and talking about their time as the other person, walking in the other person's shoes. And the final scene here is actually kind of interesting that they went with Nurse Chapel and Lieutenant Ortega's recapping Chapel's love life with a little bit of a wink and a nod. Like I felt like there was some chemistry there between the two.
Yep.
I guess they've got not a perfectly blank slate, but they've got some area to maneuver here with Nurse Chapel. So that's where we end.
Yeah, I thought I wanted to go back and listen again. I thought she said early in the episode, I thought when she was...
Yeah, there was a relationship with another female.
Yeah, I thought she had said that she had a relationship with a woman. So, I would like to think that by the time we get to the 24th century, that pansexuality is probably more the norm. I don't know. But, but then... She does say later on, she says, I need the right guy, which to me felt a little limiting. I thought that line would have been better as I need to find the right person, but maybe that would have been too telling about her and Ortegas.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I think overall a good episode. It's pretty fun, pretty lighthearted. It's kind of a comical episode considering that they take a lot of this stuff pretty seriously. That's got a comedy bent to it.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, it's the typical shore leave romp. It's sort of a Star Wars trope to sort of have fun with that. I don't remember what they did in other than the Ryza episode with Picard, but I don't remember if they did, because shore leave is something where they always sort of have fun poking around with people's personal lives sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And there's that classic shore leave episode with Kirk, and what was it, the Finnegan guy, that the jokester that he went through the academy with.
Oh,
the Irish dude who was always, teasing him and stuff, and then McCoy with the gets lanced by a knight in armor kind of thing, to the chest. And Sulu, what does Sulu do? It probably runs around with a sword, if I'm not mistaken.
That seems to be their go-to for Sulu. I think this one really worked because I think we're still early enough in the series. This is episode 5, right? I think we're early enough in this series that especially outside of Spock and Kirk, we don't really have a deep relationship with a lot of these characters. I mean, Nurse Chapel was a very supplemental character on the original series, Dr. Mbenga. So getting these ones that are, they're sort of moving the plot along, but they really are giving us a little insight into who these people are as characters. Like, I found myself midway through the episode, like looking up the actress Jess Bush who plays Chapel, because I was thinking, God, she's very charming, and I had thought that in previous episodes, but they're making them all very likable, and it really is enhancing the enjoyment of the series when they spend a little more time getting to know the characters. And it's almost in contrast to, we talked about that with Discovery, right? Discovery really is key focusing on like 3 characters and is really keeping a lot of the other ones, like they're getting an episode here and there where they kind of get a little time in the focus, but they're not really giving them a lot of getting to know you time. They really are. It's a plot driven series versus a character driven series. Yeah,
this one's a bit more traditional in that sense. But I mean, like, in case people don't know, Nurse Chapel was really lovelorn with Spock throughout the original series too, right? And he was just being dumb about most of it, right?
Yeah.
So there's that they're playing off that here, and I kind of thought there was a comment that she made at the end there where she's talking to Ortega about, I kind of got she's going to say something about, the fact that, because when T'Pring comes and starts, when Spock, as T'Pring is approaching Ortegas and Chapel, they're like, oh, the other woman sort of challenge.
Yeah. Are you trying to get in my way of my relationship? And
yeah. That's where I'm sure that's where Nurse Chapel thought the conversation was going, right? And she does have that sort of brother sister kind of relationship with Spock, in terms of giving him advice about how to deal with T'Pring, even though she's not Vulcan at all, right? So, yeah, it's interesting. And it's kind of I thought halfway through the episode there's when they got to the Freaky Friday scene, I went, what are we watching? Oh, by the way, we didn't comment on this. A 14-minute cold open.
Yeah, it's quite the stretch, eh?
Yeah, and because I think when she gets to the point where she's in his apartment and dissing him about his decor, that's the end of the cold open, right?
Yep.
That whole dream sequence at the beginning, and then her showing up. But interesting sort of tongue firmly planted in cheek episode, right? And lots of character exposition in this one.
Yeah, and it really is a palate cleanser. Again, don't forget last week's episode was the one with the Gorn, where it was terror.
Disaster.
We're going to get eaten. We're going into a black hole. It was much more intense and dramatic. So I think this was, especially when you go back and watch these as streaming in sequence. If you sit down to watch 1 through 10, I think this will be a lovely palate cleanser for the sort of intensity of last week, what everybody went through.
Yeah. And it's a little weird that at least on Paramount Plus, you get these, previously on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I'm like, this is a show that does not need that recap. I'm sure it will be occasionally helpful
they did do that, though,
when they move the broader thing. But here I'm like, did you just recap sort of what these characters are about? Like this, it's not like Discovery where each episode necessarily follows from the previous one. These are fairly standalone, so you're okay hitting the skip button there. You're able to do that.
I guess you just have to know why they're at space dock, right? And that was kind of what they needed to set up. Was we're here because we just got our butts kicked by the Gorn in the last episode.
And also why Lana is no fun, I mean, they showed the recap here as well.
Yeah. On
our episode, but it was odd because I was kind of thinking okay, because it was an odd mix of things like the fact that Lana and Una knew each other from before, when they were in that prison and they're all with big foreheads on.
The first episode, yeah.
Yeah, and because when they first sort of said we're in the prison, these two guys know each other, and I'm why are they telling us this in the recap? But obviously it makes because it becomes a buddy episode for them, right?
Yeah, I thought all three plots worked really well this week. Sometimes you sort of end up with a B plot or a C plot where you're like, oh, come on, who cares and whatever. But I really enjoyed all the story parts. I thought they all worked really well and told really good character arcs for everybody.
And I think the scene with Mbenga in the middle was to show the usefulness of his goofy hat, right?
Yeah.
Because he was doing fly fishing, and he had the really weird. I don't know if you saw the really weird sort of alien lure that he was using at the first. Right?
Kind of makes you wonder what he's fishing for, doesn't it? He also it didn't look like he was fly fishing because he was casting over his shoulder with the I don't know.
Was he?
I'm not.
He did say fly fishing in the transporter.
He did say fly fishing, but then when you see him, he's standing on the bank. You don't stand on the bank when you're fly fishing. You stand in the river with
in the water.
Yeah. Anyway, I was a little bit did somebody not know what fly fishing was on site? But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess when you're in the biodome, you only have so many options, right?
That's right. Catch what you can catch.
Yeah, so I guess we'll move on to Mr. Kenobi.
Yes. So yeah, Obi-Wan. It's episode 3 technically because we did get the 2-part drop on last Friday for the first sort of 2-part debut, and of course that one ends on a cracker where Obi-Wan finds out for the first time that Anakin did not in fact die when he left him bursting into flames and screaming how much he hates him on the banks of the river of fire. It was a fair assumption. It really was that he was just I'm not gonna just go over and snap off his head because he felt like a brother to me, but he thought when he caught on fire next to the river of lava that he was dead. But
yeah, by the way, on IMDb they're calling these part 1, part 2, part 3.
Yeah,
so this would be part 3.
Yeah, this is part 3.
It doesn't have an episode name kind of thing.
Yeah. So having had that revelation where at the end of the last episode, Reva tells him that Anakin is in fact alive and is Darth Vader. We find him in a very, very flustered state aboard the transport that is taking he and Leia to sort of get away from the Inquisitors. And he's trying to commune with Qui-Gon, which is, of course, what he was. We saw him trying to do that in a previous in the first couple episodes, where he's trying to commune with the dead, which is what he was supposed to be doing when he's on Tatooine, but clearly doesn't seem to be going well. He doesn't seem like he's making that connection, and of course he's just thrown by all this. And then he's of course flashing to the revelation, and from there we get the opening scene from $6 Million Man, where they rebuild Steve Austin. It's really quite. Oh no, wait, they're actually putting Darth Vader back together again. Yeah, very dramatic scene of them, putting him together like a Lego kit. That's quite something. And of course he comes back out and he starts speaking. And, this was one of the questions I had is James Earl Jones he's got to be pushing 90, if not in his 90s. I wasn't sure if he was going to come back and do the voice, but yes, James Earl Jones is back as the voice of Darth Vader, which is amazing. I was really thinking that obviously there have been other people who have done Darth Vader's voice in video games and cartoons and stuff like that. And it can be done well now that we've got the technology, but given sort of the value of doing an Obi-Wan series, it really was special to hear James Earl Jones's voice come out of that menacing visage again.
So can we just talk about the poor David Prowse, right?
Yeah.
He was originally cast as Darth Vader. He was told he would be able to talk in or his voice would be used in the thing. So, but so he did play Darth Vader in all three of the original movies, but his voice obviously was not used. In fact, what he was saying while he was wearing the costume is not what actually went into the movie, because they obviously took some editorial license with that, right?
Yeah.
Especially the "I'm your father" line. But Is it really necessary that this is a Hayden Christensen in this outfit? Really? Because it's not his voice, and you really don't see him. I mean, do you think that's really Hayden Christensen under all that makeup?
Yeah.
To what end? He's the same height as Ewan McGregor.
Yeah, I agree with your point that it's probably unnecessary, but I guess there's something to be said for the authenticity of carrying that role forward.
I guess.
But because again, I'm sure just like David Prowse did, and I think all three of us have probably seen the clips over the years where you actually hear David's voice coming out of Darth Vader in the moment. Yeah. I think in the moment, it probably still has a lot of gravitas, and it probably is better for Ewan McGregor as an actor to act off of too. I mean, half of acting is reacting, right? Yeah. I think probably having Hayden's voice, knowing that's him in the costume, probably enhances but the same token, though, his performance.
We do see them together because they do actually have a sword battle, and clearly the Darth Vader, whoever that's in that suit, has got to be a head taller than Ewan McGregor, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he's got new robot leg lifts, so.
True, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess you can argue about the value of it. Really, obviously, it's this whole thing that they're doing right now across the Star Wars universe on Disney Plus is, to a part, is about redeeming the original trilogy, right?
Sure, yeah.
So I guess part of that is letting Hayden have a moment where people aren't like, "You suck."
Yeah, you're a robot now. Like, how is it better?
I guess. So from there we go to him having a chat with sitting in his desk chair having a conversation over Zoom with Reva, and he basically says, I know that you want to be the Grand Inquisitor. If you can bring me Obi-Wan, you'll get the job. If you don't, you're going to get the pointy end of a red lightsaber. And from there we go back to Obi-Wan and Leia, and she's asking him about what is the Force, how does the Force work, and almost very sort of empathetically understanding that he's kind of shaken. She sort of is kind of distracting him a little bit, and she says, what's it like? And he with the analogy, he says that it's like when you're in the dark and somebody turns on the light. That's what it's like to have the Force with you, which I thought was a beautiful analogy. I never heard anyone articulate it like that before. Mm-hmm. Same scene. He's sitting there tinkering with something. You can't really see it, and all of a sudden he reaches out and he hands her Lola, the little robot that she's so fond of. Is back in one piece. Obi-Wan has fixed her little best friend, which is very sweet. So it turns out that where they're being shuttled off to, where they had been sent through this ship, was to Mapuzo, which is a mining planet, and so that they're headed there. I wrote down Anakin Vision. I can't remember why I wrote that down. So then, yes, the because I don't think that Reva says that he's Darth Vader. She just sort of says he's alive, and then Obi-Wan's like thinking about this. So in this scene here, he's remembering interactions with Anakin. That's right.
Yeah, that's true.
That's right. And then from there we get her heading back to the sort of Inquisitor's base, which of course we've seen in Fallen Order, and it starts to turn into this like the Grand Inquisitor is quote unquote dead, although they never really address that, which is kind of weird. And she shows up, and of course the fifth brother is there, and the fifth brother is like, you don't get to sit in the big chair. I get to sit in the big chair. I'm next in line. And they sort of have a little game of who's the boss. And she's like, well, I was just talking with Lord Vader, and here's what Lord Vader told me to do. And it's very funny. I mean, that's the dynamic for anyone who's watched Rebels. Of course, there is the Grand Inquisitor, and there are the other the siblings that they show throughout the series. They are very petulant, and they are all very much sort of taught to nip at each other's heels, and so that definitely carries across here. The fifth brother is very funny. I mean, he's a pretty prominent character in the Rebels cartoon, and it's interesting to see how he's realized here in real life. So they end up landing on the planet, Leia and Obi-Wan, and they're headed towards this rendezvous point that they're supposed to go to sort of find the next sort of chain to sort of get them back to where they want to be, which is Alderaan. And they are there, and nobody's there, and they're not sure what's going on. And then they see a vehicle, sort of essentially a pickup truck, driving across the landscape. No wheels, of course, no wheels. And Leia's like, why don't we flag this guy down? And he's like, that's a terrible idea. Why would we risk ourselves like that? And she's like, no, it's going to be fine. And so they find themselves hiding themselves as Orden and Luma, a pair of farmers, and they meet this shrew-like alien named Freck. And Freck, of course, is kindly offering them a lift, hop in, and a couple miles down the road, he pulls over and picks up a bunch of stormtroopers and says, everybody pile in the back. And they're like, oh, this is lovely. There's
with the Empire flag in the back, by the way. Yeah. He's flying like he is. Yeah,
is that the universal equivalent to the Southern flag?
Yeah. He was like talking it up right before they pick up the troopers. He's like, man, like the Empire's really got it together. I'm kind of liking their tax plan,
By the way, that's Zach Braff is the voice of Freck.
Yeah, it's funny. I couldn't pick it at the moment. I was like, it sounds a little bit like Seth Rogen. I was trying to figure out who it was, and then I saw the credits afterwards. I was like, oh, there you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's.
By the way, a correction on the vision thing was he was looking off into the horizon, and he imagined seeing somebody in a Jedi cloak. And then Leia says something to him, and he looks back, and he looks back, and he sees that it's not him. So
there you go.
He's kind of like expecting to see Anakin popping out, and
stabbing him in the face. Yeah. No, I remember that scene now that you mention it. So they're in the back of this truck. The Bucketheads get in, and of course they're, so where did you say you were from? And Obi-Wan slips up and calls Leia by her real name and not Luma. And she's like, well, what? Why did you call her that? And he says, well, actually, that was her mom's name, and sometimes I forget. And they managed to cover it up, but it is a little telling, right? And of course, they pull up a little further ahead. The Bucketheads get out, and Leia, being the intuitive, force sensitive child that she is, basically says like, so I get from that interaction that that was genuine. You knew my mom, right? And he says, yeah, I did know your mom. And she says, are you my dad? And he says, I wish I could say that I was.
No, he doesn't tell her that he knows her.
Well, because she says you knew my.
I know she says it. He says that, but he deflects. He kind of deflects her.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
And then she asks if you're my dad.
Yeah, but I thought it was a very sweet line where he says, "I wish I could say that I was," because he knows that he never wants her to know the truth, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and then of course they go to this traffic stop. The stormtroopers have got this laser gate set up, and they they sort of pull up, and the one trooper sort of says, well, what have we got back here? And he's like, I thought you might want to check them out. I'm like, of course he turns out to be the schmuck that we knew that he would, since he's flying the Confederate flag in the back of his truck. And they're like, well, let's call in this inspection thing, and of course the probe droid. We see one of the probe droids that we had seen in a previous scene, sort of blasting out looking for them, comes down, and they say, lift up your face, let him scan you. And of course it does, and it scans him, which I don't understand. If he was going to make a break for it at that point, why wouldn't he have just zapped that thing before it scanned his face? Wouldn't that have made much more sense, so that they wouldn't?
Because as soon as it did the facial recognition, it's going to go back to the server. And,
why wouldn't he have been like, oh, this is going to scan my face, I'm just going to stab it before it does?
Maybe Jedis just aren't good at IT. Maybe they just never study that stuff.
Well, he just fixed the Lola. I mean, come on.
I think if I can interject a little bit. So I think for this episode, what I got more out of it was like how, and I guess this is somewhat established in the first two, but I feel like it was stronger for me personally here, like how messed up Obi-Wan is, where he is very paranoid about using the Force, because that's how they find you, right? Because weird Force stuff happens, and they look around to see who's doing it. I think that's why he seems to be not using the Force as much as he should be. He's not using his lightsaber. It should be a much more familiar weapon. It seems like he does not use that except in an emergency. He's using the blaster. And so I took that as that's why he doesn't, quietly destroy the CPU of the probe droid or something, because it's like kind of obvious, like something weird is happening here, right? Why did this thing just break? That's kind of what I took out of it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But in that moment, he realizes that he has to do something. So of course he starts a fight, and he basically starts picking off stormtroopers, and in a pretty unfortunate one, the one stormtrooper falls and gets sliced in half by the gate. Pretty gruesome. And of course one of them grabs Leia and sort of says, I'll shoot her, you stand back, I'll shoot her. And he sort of evades and then shoots the last one. They say, okay, well, let's get the heck out of here. But of course it's too late, because at that point the Inquisitors know exactly where they are, and they are screwed. But they come through the other side of the gate. This vehicle pulls up. 3 troopers come out along with an Imperial commander, and they think, okay, well, now we're really well and truly caught. And then the commander ends up putting laser bolts into the back of the 3 stormtroopers and says, my name is, Tala, I'm here to rescue you. And she, ushers them away. And then we cut to the Inquisitors. They're like, yeah, they're on this planet. Let's go. Then we go back to Leia and this Imperial officer and Obi-Wan, and that they know that the plan is, let's go here. We're gonna we need to get to the pilot who's going to get you guys off planet. We need to sort of hold tight for a couple hours and sort of, keep things on the down low here. They meet, they go to this droid repair shop. They meet Ned B, who is this giant hulking loader robot, and Leia is very nice to him, and is asking his designation, and they say, well, he doesn't really speak, and he's sort of a basic robot, but she doesn't care. She's a little child, and she's very very sweet to him, and so they go into this sort of hidden compartment at the back of this repair shop, and it's very Underground Railroad, right? It's the people have signed their names on the wall, these Force sensitives and former Jedi who have sort of come through here on what they call the path, and the path is theoretically a path to where some of them can be to a safer place. One of the things that they say is that one of the people they say has been there is Quinlan Vos. So Quinlan Vos, I believe he has a cameo in one of the prequels. But Quinlan Vos, for comic book fans, is a huge name in the Dark Horse expanded universe. Quinlan Vos was like one of the lead characters for one of the Star Wars series. This sort of kind of how they portray Qui-Gon, sort of the rebel within the Jedi Order, kind of does his own thing, has his very own sort of way of doing things. But cool to hear a reference to Quinlan having survived Order 66, because we didn't really know, I think up until now, what had become of him. So knowing that he is alive in this era is kind of exciting, because that means in theory he could be part of a future series or something. So that's kind of neat. So yeah, they say that the plan is to get them to this pilot. The pilot's going to take them to Jabeam, and they're sort of biding their time there, and then they start to sort of get this. Obi-Wan gets this sort of weird feeling over him, and they sort of look out onto the street, and of course it's they see the Inquisitors, and they realize that Vader himself has come to the planet looking for Obi-Wan, and it's this moment of horror, right? This moment of just understanding this is what Anakin has become. He knows it's Anakin. He knows that this is this monstrous creature that he's looking at right now is his former Padawan, and he's really shaken by this, and in classic Vader makes a great entrance canon. He shows up and he starts pulling people through the windows and snapping children's necks and dragging people down the street without even gesturing at them, and just being death incarnate, right?
Yeah, it was pretty brutal there.
Oh, I mean, obviously, we'd seen the Rogue One where he sort of comes in, but those are people who are like, actively shooting at them. These are like, just townspeople, and he's just like, and he's not asking them questions. He's not, looking for answers. He's deliberately just provoking, right? He's just being
mean,
a monster, an absolute monster. And, it really, I think, is a great moment, because it really hammers home for Obi-Wan that this is, not only is this what Anakin has become, but that Anakin has become even more monstrous than he could have imagined.
Yeah, it fits into what I was saying earlier, that like you'll definitely get there, but Obi-Wan's reaction, like, and he's like in the cave or tunnel or something, right? Like, he's not watching Anakin at first. Like, his reaction seems like it fits in with his mindset that I sort of mentioned from the beginning of the episode, and becomes more obvious when they meet up here, that it is heavily traumatic for him for this stuff. And I think that's affecting his abilities. He's not fully rational in this episode.
Yeah, and I think it's becoming pretty clear as we see him through these first few episodes that he hasn't been practicing his use of the Force. He hasn't been practicing his lightsaber skills. He hasn't obviously been maintaining the kind of physicality, and to be fair, as somebody who's about the same age as Ewan McGregor, he's not a young man. He's getting older, and he doesn't have the benefit of Anakin's robotics. Like he's just he's a guy in his 50s. So knowing and seeing what he's seeing, he sort of says to Tala, the path agent, okay, this is bad. I'm gonna distract them. You get Leia off planet ASAP. Get her to Alderaan. And Tala's like, no, and Leia's like, no, and he's like, yeah, no, just go. So they go down this tunnel way, and they're on their way towards meeting this pilot that they're looking for. Obi-Wan is sort of gonna go and be a distraction, and of course this leads to the sort of culminating, most important scene of this episode, where and it had to happen, of course. Although I'm a little surprised it happened in episode 3, but I guess this is the hero's journey, right? So he comes face to face with Vader, and they have this interaction, and the beautiful lines from both of them. What have you become? I am what you made me. Just beautiful writing. Those lines just crackle, and they have this Vader is hunting Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan does ignite his lightsaber for the first time in the series, and interesting scene where it's really dark where they are, and only the light of their lightsabers is kind of lighting their way, and it's almost one of those things where you've got a flashlight, but it's not necessarily helping. It's like holding a torch, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of in your face. It's kind of lighting the way, but it's also kind of distracting you. They did a really good job, I thought, filming that, of making it very disorienting for Obi-Wan, and yeah, I mean it it's pretty good. Meanwhile, back in the little village, Reva, sort of following a hunch, goes into the droid repair station and finds the path and finds the sort of tunnel, and sort of grumble, and yeah, they are gonna, she's clearly sort of showing that she's the smartest of the Inquisitors. She's really digging into it. We go down the tunnel, and you can hear the sort of bad situation, and Tala and Leia are sort of trying to figure out what to do, and Tala says, come on, we gotta go, and Leia says, no, go save Obi-Wan, you go help him, and I'll go this way. She says, okay, you run until you find the pilot. Fine. Tala goes back, and it's a good thing she does, because then we get this duel between Obi-Wan and Vader. And to call it a duel is a little unfair. It's basically just Vader beating the living crap out of Obi-Wan Kenobi,
dragging him through the fire.
Yeah, exactly. He at one point he sort of takes this ore, this ore that they're mining from the planet, and he throws it on the ground, and he lights it on fire with his lightsaber and drags Obi-Wan through it so that he burns, because he wants him to understand the pain that he went through. I mean, it's a really poignant and awful scene. Very quite dark, really. Like, I mean, not that the scene where Obi-Wan watches Anakin catch on fire is much better, but it's pretty dark. And it's in that moment that Tala and Ned come to the rescue, and they do actually manage to save Obi-Wan. They pull him out of danger, and they end up igniting a lot of the ore, so that Vader won't walk through that pile. We've established, thanks to the end of Return of the Jedi, that armor's tough, but it will burn. So in that moment, he's like, damn it, he got away, but he knows now, like, he knows Obi-Wan's there. He knows that he's more powerful than him. And, so he sort of, strategically retreats, and they take Obi-Wan and they take off. And then we see Leia come to the end of the tunnel, and she's supposed to be meeting the pilot. She comes out and says, are you the person I'm supposed to be meeting? And Reva says, yeah, I'm the person you're supposed to be meeting. And the pilot is lying dead on the floor.
Yeah. So I had a bit of trouble with that particular part, because Tala and Leia are going down the tunnel, right? And then does Reva finds the original place where they had Ned be, and where they get into the tunnel,
Yep.
right, from the way place, right?
Yep.
So she theoretically starts walking down that hallway, right? And so Tala's running back she's running back to help Obi-Wan, right?
Yeah, there must be another way out. Like that's the only thing, because I had the same thought. I'm like, well, wouldn't she have run face to face with Reva? But also Reva, we established she doesn't follow that tunnel. She circles back around, right?
Oh,
Because she's at the end of the tunnel when Leia comes out. How she figures out where it's going to come out, I'm not sure.
yeah.
But she does.
Well, it's a good plot point, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, interesting. Ben, very dramatic, very, very sort of epic. This is definitely feeling a very different than the other Disney Plus series. It's very, very cinematic, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting how Obi-Wan's match with Darth, clearly outmatched, as you said, right? It's interesting how much gravitas that Obi-Wan has lost in the last 10 years, right? Because he's lost a lot of, like, he was very confident in Clone Wars. He was very confident in all of the movies, even as a solo guy going investigating, the clone army generation and all that stuff, and his fights with Count Dooku and all those kind of guys, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's lost his edge, right, as it were, right? But then again, I don't ever remember being dragged through the fire. But that kind of, it was interesting. I don't ever remember seeing any. Mind you, never really see Obi-Wan, without clothes on. At least Alex Guinness, so you can't see that he's been burned by Vader in the past. And is this the when Vader says, "I've not sensed that person since," and he turns and walks out of the room when Han Solo and Luke and Obi-Wan first land on the Death Star in the first movie, and he kind of just sort of, "I've not sensed that presence since," and then he walks away, right? I wonder if this is the since.
Well, it has to be, right?
Or is it another since?
I think we are supposed to think it was from long since past, but now that they've sort of bridged this gap, I mean,
it's only been 10 years. 10 years is not that long, really.
No, all things being equal, but
I think I met Timey. I did meet Timey 10 years ago.
I feel like it still works okay there. The one that's a little harder for me is the when I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
Yeah. Now I'm the master.
He was whooping up on him. Like you guys talked about the just like destroying him and dragging him through to cause him to suffer. Like he was using the one-handed saber technique that he uses against Luke as kind of a like showing off sort of thing, right? Yeah. It's not the two-handed fight with Obi-Wan or the later two-handed fight with Jedi Luke that it feels like there's a difference in Vader's style, right? Depending who he's fighting against. Like
you're true.
When it was going up against Mike Tyson, it's like, all right, like in prime Mike Tyson, it's like, all right, he's not gonna kill us. He's gonna fight us with his jab or something, because he can still beat us up with that. But if he's going up against Evander Holyfield, it's like, all right, now he's ready to bite some ears, right?
Yeah, I mean, there must be some limit to his visibility and his ability to move, because he's not like, he hasn't got the flexibility of Darth Maul. Because remember that fight between Obi-Wan and Darth Maul was quite animated, right? And I mean, Ewan McGregor had all those sort of moves where he could like whip his lightsaber behind his back and defend himself, right? He wasn't doing that. And then Vader's also got the power to force push, because he pushes Obi-Wan around a few times, right? And drags him through the flames, right? Without making contact. So
yeah, his style is more using the force for pushing or telekinesis type activities, and his fighting style as Vader is much more of like swinging an axe, right? Like, I am going to bludgeon you with this thing.
Yeah. And I would expect, if in all of the stories we've ever seen about any of the Jedis preparing for battle, like, there should be a scene coming up where Ewan McGregor goes off and does, practices with that little robot thing that fires him with the blast shield down, like he's got to go and practice his moves right now, that because he looks at the lightsaber in the second part and doesn't turn it on when he's running away from Reva, right? And he's avoiding her because he doesn't want to expose Leia at that point. But here, in this fight, he looks at his lightsaber and turns it on when he goes to. I think he's trying to distract Vader. Really, at the end of the day, he's not really. He's trying to draw attention away from Leia, right?
Yeah, I mean, when Vader shows up, it's like there's no hiding that I'm the Jedi you all have been looking for. So using the Force, using a lightsaber is more of a plausible option, and clearly using a blaster against Vader is a bad idea.
Well, and also if Vader is that all powerful, and he seems like he is, he would be able to sense. Like somebody pointed a comment here on IMDb that this is the closest that Leia and Anakin have been to each other since she was born, right? Mm-hmm. And then of course they have those toe-to-toe discussions on the Death Star, right? But and it's funny that like again the prequel problem. How come Vader doesn't know that she's his daughter?
Well, I don't think he has any cause to care at this point. He's singularly focused on Obi-Wan. He's not thinking big picture. Who is this child? Right. Why is Obi-Wan protecting him?
No, I don't mean that. I mean like I'm talking about the part where he's interrogating her in the brig and she. Yeah,
I think that one is a retcon issue from 40 years ago. Is that when you make the decision. And I'm not sure that it was in the moment. I don't think Princess Leia, when the original movie came out, I don't think that was necessarily in Lucas's mind that this is his daughter.
No. Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice in retrospect to have a moment where he's like, you feel weird or something, but that's the problem is that
you look familiar to me
when you make those retcon things. Well, and then also again, she's like Padme in our world. Padme is modeled after Leia, not vice versa. But in his world, he would be able to look at her and be like, "Oh, she reminds me so much of my ex,
she looks like my cousin,
my dead wife, right?
Yeah, exactly.
She's." And guys, I mean, it takes Obi-Wan like 6 seconds to be like, "Oh my God, you're so much like your mother."
Yeah.
You'd think that with that same kind of commanding presence and in sort of intuitive nature that even Vader in her presence would be like, "Oh my God, you're clearly Padme's daughter."
Yeah.
But good episode again. I wasn't sure if they were going to make us wait, like they were going to have a lot of near misses and then have it sort of culminate with the two of them meeting. But to have them have this conflict where it's so one-sided again on the sort of stereotypical hero's journey, it's the setback that sets you back on the path to redemption or whatever. It makes sense for the two of them to come face to face, for Obi-Wan to have gotten this sort of kick in the pants, and then hopefully it's the spur that gets him back to
back to form,
so that he understands more, because again he's just a sad sack when we see him in the first couple episodes on Tatooine. He's living this humble life, but it's beyond the humble life. He is defeated. He is lost, and so that's why he's not connecting to Qui-Gon. That's why he's not connecting to the Force, is because there has to be intent, right? There has to be
So for me, what I'll say is I liked this episode a lot more than I did the first two. And I didn't dislike the first two. I think last week I said that it was nice. This one, I really bought into the idea of this series in this episode. So it's definitely a plus for me.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that we've had 3 episodes that have come out in 5 days, and that's halfway through the series, and then the series will be over in 3 weeks. It kind of works because, as I say, that it really has a cinematic feel. This really feels more grand in scale, perhaps, than even The Mandalorian and the other ones. And those are amazing. I mean, again, I'm a Mandalorian fan. I'm a fan of Book of Boba Fett. I'm a fan of sort of all the stuff that they've done so far. But this just feels very, and maybe just because of who the protagonist and antagonist are, it feels bigger somehow.
Yeah, we'll have to see where it goes in the next 2 episodes or whatever.
Yeah, 3 episodes. As I say, it's
no, I know 3 to
almost.
Go. We're at the halfway point.
Yeah, it's crazy to think we're already there, but again, three episodes seem to work well together. I'll be curious where they continue to go with this.
So it's interesting. I read a couple of things today about the fact that this is more about Leia than it's going to be about Luke, right? Because I think A New Hope is more about Luke, right? So this is kind of a Leia exposition. I wonder, are we going to, because she's not home yet. He hasn't solved getting her back to Bail Organa yet, right? And it, it doesn't fit with the years ago you served my father in the, as if you don't know.
That's another, again, prequel problems, right?
Redcon, yeah, exactly. basically. Unless she has to be formal and pretend she doesn't know him, kind of thing.
Or she gets a blow to the head at some point in the next couple episodes.
Yeah, that's true. Right. Or she's just ditzy or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. Or she does a lot of cocaine in the 1980s, just saying.
Yeah, are we going to talk about the Orville, or are we going to just sort of gloss
I was
over
going to ask, did you guys watch the Orville?
I did.
I fell asleep watching it.
Did you?
I don't know what that says about me.
I don't blame you.
I watched, I got through about the first half, and then I started...
When did you watch it?
What's that?
When did you watch it?
Right before we aired. That's why I was a couple minutes late. I fell asleep watching it.
Oh.
I mean, it's been a busy couple days for me, so I don't want to blame it entirely on the episode. But I watched Star Trek, and then I was sitting downstairs, and I thought, I'll throw the Orville on. And I watched the first bit, and then it was kind of dragging, and I was just like, and I dozed off. I woke up and watched the end of it, but it's just I did the Tim at the movies deal. I just sort of dozed off for a part of the middle of it.
I think we can save it for next week. But
please don't. I'm going to watch it when we're done here. So
so for me, this episode did nothing for me. My opinion of the Orville is it's still trying too hard to be the next generation. I mean, they have a huge budget now for CG effects. They spent the last 3 years working on CG. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's a sensitive subject that they covered today, from a humanistic point of view, but it was just like, really, I thought, they were going to, find a way to get this character off the show. Cause I mean, if you followed Orville I asked this question last week, what are they going to do with Isaac? Right. Mm-hmm. And that's, they answer that today, sort of, and it's kind of like, they have human reactions, but I can't take I want to say Seth Rogen. I can't say Seth MacFarlane seriously as the leader of this ship, He doesn't have, he's not a Kirk, he's not an Anson Mount, he's not even a Jonathan Archer for that matter, like he just doesn't have it. Yeah. I don't get it. Kelly I kind of get sort of her demeanor. But I don't know, just Isaac is like, he's so not emotional.
Well, it almost seems like a bridge too far. I mean, Data as the sort of robot, and of course the comparisons between
who
Isaac
wants to be human, and Spock's the human who wants to be Vulcan.
That's it. I mean, obviously they're following an archetype there, which is established. But having him be non-emotive in the face is a real tough go. It's a real tough go.
Did you see the gas giant solution here, or did you fall asleep before that happened?
No, I think I must have dozed off for that.
Okay, I'm not gonna. Let's talk about it next week, because you're gonna laugh when you see that scene.
All right.
It was really weird timing for this episode for like a bunch of reasons, and it's been delayed because of COVID. It got delayed an extra 3 months. I think it was supposed to premiere in March, and for me.
Oh, so they could have shared. They could have stolen the scripts and shared scripts between this and another science fiction show, which we'll talk about later.
It's one of those weird things that happens in Hollywood of like, hey, there's 2 volcano movies out at the same time. Hey, there's 2 insect bug related movies out at the same time. I'm not going to say that didn't happen because it clearly does in Hollywood, but I think
it's got to be the craft services people. I'm telling you, they talk too much. Yeah.
I think for me. And it is a little weird. You guys are getting on Disney Plus. I don't know what that looks like. Yep. For us, it's on Hulu. It's a little non-obvious because this is season 3, but it has a new name. So in the Hulu UI, you'll see season 1, season 2, and then New Horizons. And you're like, what the heck is that? It's like, that's your 3rd season there. So kind of a weird thing there. But the things about the Orville are still the same. So if you like the first 2 seasons, I think you'll like this first episode that we watched for the 3rd season. If you didn't like it, I don't think you're going to like it because it's the same kind of thing. And this week's episode was sort of the take on what if Commander Sisko and post-Locutus Jean-Luc Picard actually had to work together constantly on the same ship and not just, they had a very grumpy meeting once on Deep Space Nine. Yeah, it's sort of what this episode is set up. And I will say that the way the episode resolved Isaac's story didn't resolve the way I thought it was going to. Me too. Was like, I was like, oh, here's the head fake. I think I figured out how they're going to do it. And they didn't do it that way. they do it in a completely different way. That kind of surprised me, and I'm kind of hoping that the post nut clarity thing becomes like a meme for these characters, because that seems to be kind of their way of running things.
But you know what I mean about like the CGI? Like the CGI is amazing. It's great. I mean, like if that's what you think good sci-fi, Trek or whatever it is. I mean, again, like a friend of mine commented, or John Milker commented on Facebook the other day. It's like, don't they have dirt in the future?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's very similar. Like, the CGI is amazing. They've gone to great detail on the ship. I mean, the ship doesn't even look like the same ship. It's so like, the Enterprise after Khan. You know how they went back and they redid it, kind of thing. Yep. Redid the model. It's like that. All of a sudden, the Orville has got like, it's amazing. And again, there were way too many ships in this episode, right?
Yeah.
Mind you, some of them are dream sequences, right? But and the sort of star-based look, and yeah, and then so you have that, and then you have these stark interior scenes where there's like nothing going on. Like they spend all this time and attention on detail on the outside of the ship, and then inside the ship, it's like a boring boardroom.
Yeah.
It's cozy, and I'm a little surprised that you guys are so taken aback by Isaac. I'm like, that is Doctor Who with more budget, like historical Doctor Who, not
Doctor Who is the lowest. Doctor Who is the lowest of. I mean, it's like it's cable access sci-fi, like practically.
Some of the stuff from the 70s and 80s was tragically bad.
It was just video effects. Like the guy turned the knob. Oh, here comes the bad scene. They turned the knob on the video effects panel, and
like I've seen more as a newbie to Doctor Who. I've seen more modern Jodie Whittaker Cyberman stuff, but I'm like, what the Cybermen look like whenever they came out in like 60s, 70s or whatever. I'm like, oh, they almost certainly look like Isaac, right? Like that style seems like it makes sense.
Yeah, the most menacing thing was basically the Dalek back in the 60s, and it was literally like a inverted trash can with a plunger sticking out of the front.
It was
of it,
that right into the 80s. I remember one of my British friends being like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you didn't watch Doctor Who. You should watch Doctor Who." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, I've seen Star Wars, like come on, this is awful."
But by the same token, though, it was like Jaime sort of said, it was the drought between the original series and TNG. That's kind of where that end fit in, I mean, even Battlestar Galactica was, amazing, amazeballs, and Planet of the Apes and all that. They kind of filled in a lot of the gaps. And then, I mean, there was a Planet of the Apes TV show. There was the original Battlestar Galactica TV show. I think part of the allure of Doctor Who was the fact that you really had to be lucky to see it, because it was on PBS. It had a really odd schedule of when it was going to be on. It was tough to sort of catch it. And, back then we were busy going to Tashi Station to get our power converters, So,
That's about right.
We didn't have time to watch TV on Saturday afternoons. Yeah. Anyway, let's move to our watch list. And Jaime, you can go first with The Man from Tirana.
Yeah, The Man from Tirana, or as you would say in the States, The Man from Toronto. Starring
more
it's starring Kevin Hart. We translate for this bilingual audience we have. So this stars Kevin Hart and Woody Harrelson. It's coming out on Netflix on June 24th, and this is, I think, the kind of movie where, look, it's not going to win awards. It's going to be a nice, summer popcorn flick. It's got Woody Harrelson and Kevin Hart. I'm like, I kind of know what I'm getting in for. Basic plot premise appears to be that there is a man from Toronto who's a like assassin, but really more of like a torture kind of specialist, and he's supposed to be here helping some villains torture a person. And
he's an inquisitor, right?
Yeah, and Kevin Hart, for reasons that are a little unclear from the trailer, could be a couple different reasons, ends up being mistaken for the Man from Toronto, and then has to live as the Man from Toronto across the rest of this movie to keep up the illusion here. Looks like fun in the if you liked Red Notice and with The Rock and Gal Gadot and oh my god, I see his face, I can't say his name.
Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds, thank you.
Canada's own.
Yeah, I feel. I mean, this will be a little bit less epic, I think, than that one. That was swinging a little bit for the fences. This one is more like, oh, this is a nice film for the summer. Get your popcorn ready, get your soda ready, and you don't even have to pay anything. You just have to turn on your TV.
Looks funny. Definitely an airplane movie for sure. But yeah, it looks pretty funny. Like, yeah. By the way, do you guys, you know the Shark Tank show that is on the States, right? The investor show, where you have your elevator pitch. Well, that's started out as Dragon's Den on CBC, and Kevin Leary is the O'Leary, I think it is. Yeah. He took it to the States and turned it into... Anyway, Kevin Hart is one of the investors on the American version now, which I flipped by the channel the other day. I'm like, is that Kevin Hart?
They have different...
Turns out it is.
Guest ones. Ashton Kutcher was on the show.
Oh, okay.
And there was it's like a software guy who I don't think it was Larry Ellison. There was somebody that, like, they have the main sort of set of folks, and then occasionally have these guest sharks.
Well, Kevin Leary was Reader Rabbit. That was how he made his millions. And then isn't Mark Cuban some sort of software guy?
Yeah, who owns... That's how he made his money from software in like the 90s, I think, and owns the Dallas Mavericks NBA team.
Yeah, and one of the Canadian guys, I think he went to the American show initially. Was one of those, not Match.com, but like another site like that. That's how he got his fame and fortune, right? So, yeah, it's interesting. I very rarely watch the show because, I mean, it's harder to watch. The Canadian version is a little bit more down to earth. Maybe it's because they talk about maple syrup and Boston pizza and stuff. But yeah.
So what's your pitch? It's like, all right, so we've been selling these Latouks. How many did you sell? Well, we've had gross sales of 1.5 million to date. Well, what was it in the last year? Well, it was 500,000 to 500,000 toonies this past quarter.
Yeah, but in Canada, it's like 10,000 was our last sales, and we want 500,000. We want you to invest 500,000. And yeah, it's not like the state scale at all, for sure. Anyway, so let's move over to Jonathan's pick.
Yeah, I went with the obvious stuff that again we were talking about, what a bonanza June is. We've already gotten Obi-Wan and now the Orville's back, and next The Boys is tomorrow, so we get the first 3 episodes all drop at once of the next season 3 of The Boys is on Amazon Prime. So yeah, can't wait to get back into that. I thought that was such an amazing season 2. I can't wait to see what they do to keep that momentum up for season 3. And then, yeah, next week we get Ms. Marvel, the new Marvel Disney Plus series, which again, coming off of like something as intense as Multiverse of Madness, and coming off of sort of dark stretch with Obi-Wan, it'll be nice. It seems like a bit of a palate cleanse. It's following a teenage girl. It's a little lighter, so I think that'll be good to throw into the mix too, especially on the same week that you're watching The Boys. I think it'll be good to have something that's maybe just a little bit lighter fare. But yeah, I'm excited for both of those series. They both look really good, and it's nice that those series will sort of carry into July, so you'll have a little bit of fun stuff to cover into the summer.
Cool. Yeah. Good. Are you how far into Stranger Things are you still strapped to your partner there?
No, I did independently go and watch. I watched the first episode the other night. We're still working our way through just to I think we're the second last episode of season 1 of Ozark as a couple. So we're working our way through that one, and she's sort of in agreement that when we have time together, that's what we want to watch. So that's good. But I did watch the first episode. But that's also on my to sort of catch up with it. Again, it's nice in its own way that the episodes are sort of there, but it's, again, we talked about the sort of the distribution model of week to week versus dropping all at once. It really is kind of a momentum kill for and it really does create a lot of sort of inequities. If you don't have the time, those episodes are all just sort of sitting there. I really am more a fan of the week to week just because it paces things out. Like, I feel like I'm behind on Stranger Things after like 3 or 4 years of not seeing it, which is ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I feel the same way. I kind of struggle. I mean, I really enjoyed season 1 of Stranger Things, and I kind of trying to remember the other 3 seasons to sort of get ready for this one.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah. Have you watched Have you been watching it?
I haven't watched any. I've been catching up on other things, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. Yeah, for sure. And then I started watching a couple of other shows that are odd. I've watched like one episode of a couple of things that I want to sort of get into. I think your next one that you and Sherry are going to watch together is called The Time Traveler's Wife, which is one of my picks for today. A really interesting story. It's it borders on it's sci-fi, but it's a love story sort of thing, right?
It's a famous book, right?
Yeah, and definitely. It borrows from, I kind of wonder if the Matt Smith, Amy Pond storyline where he meets her as a young girl, I kind of want to go back and figure out which came first, because that's sort of the one of the points about this is that it's about a man who, as a young boy, starts traveling through time. Mm-hmm. He never knows when he's going to bounce, and he just bounces from, forward, backward, constantly. Basically disappears. His clothes stay where he was, so he arrives nude wherever he ends up, and then he has to steal and borrow and kind of like get money and get food and get clothing and run away from people, because he'll appear in the middle of a scene, and a man hunting with his dog, and he'll start shooting at him, kind of thing, and he ends up having to fight with people to get clothes and stuff like that. So it's kind of and he never knows when he's going to bounce. He just, like I said, he goes back and forth, and he meets himself. It
sounds like Quantum Leap to me, man. I don't know.
It is very much so, but it's kind of like he actually had, when he's a young kid, he's trained on how to be a time traveler by an older person who, of course, is him, right? So he does there, and there's a couple of times where he goes back to important events in his life. He keeps getting pulled back to at various stages of his life. And it's interesting when he bounces in, it says the character's name is Henry. It'll say Henry is 36, and the love interest Claire is 9, or Claire is 16, or Claire is 20. Because it's the interesting about it, you sort of get focused on his dilemma in terms of how he bounces around. But it's actually, as she points out in the middle of episode number 2, this is a story about the time traveler's wife, not the time traveler, right? So he meets this girl as a young kid, and eventually, like, she at one point says to him when she's around, I think she's around 10 or 12, she says, "Do you have a wife?" And he says, "Yeah, I do." And he goes, "What's her name?" And he goes, "Well, as a matter of fact, her name is Claire as well." And then the kid later on in a later episode kind of he meets her 152 times. We find out why before she meets him as an adult woman, kind of thing, right? And he comes in at different ages. Her relationship with him is at different ages, and his relationship with her is as she grows older, kind of thing, right? And it's an interesting thing, and it's dropping one episode per week, so I'm only into the 3rd episode, and I have to wait, for the next one to come out. But it's definitely a really interesting, timey-wimey story, but it's got that love angle to it. So there's a relationship, the difficulties of relationships, but told in over time, kind of thing. And the story's not told in any kind of linear fashion either, right? So it's kind of a fun sort of twisty sort of story, but it's got all the I'm a sucker for timey-wimey stuff anyway, right? So yeah, it's definitely, it's not like Doctor Who, which goes from one episode to another. It's the same thing, but just sort of the complications of bouncing around in time, right?
Yeah. Anyway. I remember when the book came out. I was actually working in books at the time, it was early 2000s, and Audrey Niffenegger's book came out, and it was a huge hit, and it did really well. And then they did a film version of this as well. And it was in the film version that there was a little bit of a discussion about this, but I know that since this series has come out, there's been a little more discussion about it. There is a bit of a perception on this that you could perceive what he's doing throughout this time as grooming.
Yes, totally. Yeah. Well, he does address that actually in a couple of scenes where, he's like, he talks about some of the questions she asks him as a young, precocious girl, and he kind of goes, "I couldn't go there at that point in time," right? Sort of thing. Yeah. Weird. Well, you sort of do meet him at points when, like, when she meets him when she's like 24, 22 or something like that, he hasn't met her yet.
Yeah.
right? So there's kind of that, but he's like 35 when he first meets her, kind of thing. Yeah, you're totally right. It does have that sort of weird, and he does talk about the fact that this is a weird sort of situation to be in, right? Because her parents don't know about it, and he doesn't meet her family until quite a bit later, right? Sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there is a sort of, it'd be interesting to see how the book sort of lays it out, because the film or this TV show kind of plays with the timeline as well. And then you find like there's some really interesting expositions, like he says, "I'll tell you," like she says, "Why are you sad?" He'll say, I'll tell you later. I mean, we find out why he's sad repeatedly. But he says, and he says something funny, like, I'll tell you when a man with a green hand serves you a latte, at near an ocean in view or whatever, right? And yeah, so I'm not gonna, that's all I'll say about that. But when he does get to the point when it becomes the day, as she calls it, when he tells her why he's sad, she actually gets served a latte by a man with a green hand. So and yet he, It's interesting. Like, I'm not going to go into too much because it'll be a bit spoilery, but it would be really hard to spoil this whole show. I probably, like, other than what I've told you so far, right? That's really good. And the other movie I want to talk about, and I'm sorry, John, but it's Top Gun, Maverick. I highly recommend that you go see this on IMAX. I couldn't get a ticket to IMAX. I went to see it in Ultra AVX, and what's interesting about the theater I went to was I always like to sit in sort of near the back in these kind of big things, but like it's funny how they have the D-box seats. This theater I went to, the D-box seats are right down at front.
Weird.
So yeah, so I think the best seats in this house would have been in the middle area, right? But again, because of COVID, I wanted to find a place where I could sit that I was comfortable and not near too many people, which is for me is the back row, because then I don't have anybody weird behind me doing odd things, right? But yeah, it still had that sort of, it's really amazing. It's a really good experience. Tom Cruise does come on at the very beginning, Jonathan, to tell you that he's really happy that you came and saw it on the big screen and that you're ready for this experience. It is definitely a Pacific Rim. Get your big bucket of popcorn. Get your girlfriend, because there is that love interest stuff. Some questions I have about it, like, okay, I know COVID's over, so we're not wearing life jackets when we're sailing across a rough sea on a boat to stay in. There's a scene where Jennifer Connelly's steering a sailboat, and its seas are pretty rough, and neither one of them is wearing a life jacket, which I thought was, okay, that's good. That's good for the kids. But what I want to talk about too, like, so the plane effects are amazing. There's a couple of times where Han Solo comes in, as Luke's trying to hit the spot with the bomb kind of thing, like to blow up the Death Star, right? Just like, shooting womp rats in my T-36 back home, right, in Beggar's Canyon. There totally is Beggar's Canyon, or totally is all that kind of stuff. And like, nothing original about that. And there are times when, like, completely the guns are drawn, you're just about to get clobbered, and Han Solo comes in and blasts the protagonist away, right? So antagonist away. So yeah, there and it's got some Indiana Jones kind of hints to it, and but it is really enjoyable from a big bucket of popcorn point of view. What I really liked about it, though, was the way they worked Val Kilmer into the story, right? Because I wasn't aware that he was going to be in the movie. I don't think we talked about that at all. Because what's he going to do, right? So in this, one of the main plot points about this is Maverick is this guy who's never really advanced much in, after he became a Top Gun, never advances much in, like, he's still a captain, right? And most of the people, like, they say to him at some point, you should be like a 2-star admiral by this time at your age, because he's 50 something, right? And yet he's not, and he keeps getting into trouble and keeps getting, kicked out or, thrown out of his unit or whatever. And Iceman has been covering his butt, because Iceman is now like a 4-star general or 4-star admiral or whatever, right? And so he keeps it. So they start out by introducing Val Kilmer's character through text message, right? So he's texting Tom Cruise's character. Because at the very beginning, he gets thrown out of this thing, and then he's called back in to help the Top Gun unit, because there's a mission that only he can do, or Iceman wants him to come back and train the Top Gun pilots to take on this this conflict that they have to deal with, right? So they do that, and there is a very touching scene in the middle where, and hats off to Tom Cruise, or production, or whoever did this, because there is a scene in the middle where where Iceman says, "I need to talk to you," right? And so Tom Cruise goes to the character's house, and of course, the character has throat cancer and can't talk, and so he's using his computer like a Stephen Hawking's kind of thing to kind of chat with Tom Cruise in the room. And then eventually the two of them stand up, and they're right beside each other, and Val Kilmer actually does what he can to talk to Tom Cruise in character, which is really, really kind of an interesting scene from a point of view of like, what are you going to do in this case? Like, we know why he can't be in Mad Mardigan, right? Yeah. But yeah, it was really kind of cool. And then at some point, Val Kilmer says something like, let's hug it out or whatever. And Tom Cruise just looks at him and goes, "It was a good moment. Let's just leave it at that," right? So yeah, it was kind of good the way they worked him in. And of course, there's the whole thing with Goose. There's the legacy of Goose in there and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah, I mean, they telegraphed the Goose's son thing pretty hard in the trailers. So
it's hard to hide the fact that Rooster is Goose's son. Yeah, exactly. And there's this conflict between the two of them. And of course, I think you can probably write the story yourself. If I sort of gave you some plot points, you'd probably figure out where it's going to go. A few surprises, but nothing that we haven't seen in other movies before, kind of thing. But totally enjoyable from a roller coaster ride kind of deal. Not quite as fun as the Top Gun ride at Canada's Wonderland, but pretty close. Yeah, that's cool. And my last pick is Pistol, which is the story of the Sex Pistols. It's actually based on Jones's book. Steve Jones was the guitarist for the Sex Pistols. And the reason why I thought it was interesting, I'm familiar with the story. Chrissie Hynde is in it because she had a relationship with Steve Jones for a long time while she was in London trying to find her career, kind of thing. The whole story of Malcolm McDowell and how he promotes the Sex Pistols, and sort of almost like an anti-boy band kind of idea. An interesting story. A little bit of Sid and Nancy in there. If you've seen this Sid and Nancy, you've already probably already know the story of them. But yeah, it was really interesting to see. And this is what's his name? The director Danny Boyle, right? Brain Spotting guy. So I think it's 6 parts. Really interesting. The music's obviously great because if you're a Sex Pistols fan, and kind of how they went from being non-musicians to actually almost sounding like something, and until they kind of explode at the end there. So the personality conflicts, you get a real sense of how brilliant Johnny Rotten is, or John Lydon is, and how. The challenges of being working class kids in growing up in this kind of environment. And it's funny because I knew who Chrissie Hynde was in the story, because they only referred to her as Chrissie they don't actually call her Chrissie Hynde until almost the last reel of the show, right? But so because she emerges as the lead singer of the Pretenders at the end of the movie. But yeah, a really interesting story if you're into the history of rock and roll. And I mean, punk basically, between the Sex Pistols and the Clash, and if you kind of on the dawn of, end of disco, dawn of punk, and into new wave, it was kind of a historical time period, and interesting how the British public reacted, and TV reacted, and record industry reacted, and all that kind of stuff, and how it was like a car accident pretty much.
Yeah, does it run right up to the end of like the band, or the end of like Sid's life, or where does it sort of take you to? It goes. I think it goes up to the Rock and Roll Swindle, which was and actually the beginning of Brass in Pocket by Chrissie Hynde, but it goes through the whole sort of initial Steve Jones putting together the band. And then he realizes when he gets in front of people, he suffers from huge stage fright. He was originally the singer. He's actually illiterate, so that was a challenge for him. And they kind of allude to it throughout the story, but you really get the impression. The tragedy of Glenn Matlock, who was the actual talented musician in the band who wrote a lot of the songs. He was the bass player.
how they, Malcolm McDowell and his wife partner had two Steves, that one of them was going to become the lead singer, and they sent, two Johns, John Lydon. They sent him over. Malcolm McDowell sent him over, but in fact, the wife wanted the other John, who was Sid Vicious's real name, to be the lead singer. And then, Sid was just a real tragedy, and like tragic figure. You get that sense real early. Sort of his mother got him into the heroin and all that stuff, right? So. Yeah, they really do. It's funny because in Chrissie Hynde's autobiography, she talks about her relationship with Nancy Spurgeon, because they were two Americans in London, right? They had a relatively close relationship, according to Chrissie Hynde's autobiography. But in this, they make it sound like Nancy was just like a car accident kind of thing, right? They're a bit of a bipolar character, right? And I think she was part of the problem for Sid, right? Yeah. And going through Northern England, they got, that's where they got into a lot of fights. And then, of course, when they came to the States and they did their first American tour, that was a real, there were a lot of tussles. And, that's where, I don't know if you heard the story. You probably know the story about Sid hitting somebody over the head with his bass guitar and cutting himself and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It was an interesting time in punk, general punk, like the spitting and the mosh pitting and, where all that sort of stuff came from, right?
Yeah.
Interesting, really, really good show. I mean, and of course it's Danny Boyle, so it's told really, really well, right?
Cool.
And it's only 6 parts. Pretty
And
cool.
where is it?
It's on Disney Plus of all places.
I thought that's where I had seen that it was going to be
F-bombs and S-bombs and exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Disney Plus is clearly a different animal here in Canada than it is south of the border. I think, you made an allusion to that earlier, that, because we're getting the Hulu plus the Fox plus all the other stuff, it definitely is a different platform.
Mm-hmm. I think it's FX in the States, right?
Yeah, it almost feels like a completely, it feels more like Netflix. It's sort of a blended thing here. We sort of take for granted that it's not like that elsewhere.
Yeah, definitely. So, that's pretty cool. And I guess that's it for another week. So I guess until next time, Jonathan, people want to get in touch with you. Where do they find you?
You can always find me on Twitter and Instagram as @JPKNews.
And Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you?
I'm on Twitter as @DevOfTheHair.
Right. And my name, as usual, is Tim Mitra, TIMMITRA. On the Twitter machine is where you'll find me. And so until next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
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 You've been listening to the Spockcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spockcast website at spockcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spockcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpockcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spockcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spockcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
By the way, on Smartless last week, they had Ben, I can't remember his name, the director from Severance, and Mira's kid, Ben Stiller.
Great.
That was a great episode. Yeah, you should definitely listen to that one. It was talking about his whole career and, coming up as a kid of, famous parents and all this, trying to go through school and figure, like Jason Bateman, he was a kid actor,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, I remember him from being on the Valerie Harper show, right?
Yeah. Oh, was he? Yeah, and then he was also on his mother's show too for a while. Yeah. She was like a cop at some point, I think. Yeah. And talking about now he's been directing for the last 5 years, and he's like, I can't believe I've been doing that for 5 years, right? And an amazing show, amazing stuff he's directing, right?
Yeah, I've been I think half of the time that we're watching Ozark is my wife and I alternately looking at each other going, it's unfair how good he looks.
You're talking about
Jason Bateman. He's aging unbelievably well. I mean, he's only a few years older than me, but God, it's just, he hasn't aged at all. It's freaky. You watch Arrested Development was 25 years ago, and he looks the same.
Yeah, have you gotten to the point where you hate Laura Linney?
Not. I mean, up and down. She's kind of obviously a moving target in this show. There are times where she's very, you appreciate her for being the tough mama bear, and there's times where you're like, ooh, you're a rotten partner. I love Laura Linney. I've been a fan of hers for 30 years, but so she's got a long leash in my books again. Things like The Truman Show, and she's just
definitely
such a talented performer.
We've got to talk about the young lady in episode 2 of Obi-Wan that hands him the drugs.
That's his daughter. Yeah.
That's his daughter. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, I saw that moving its way around the socials this week, and they said, they said that the particularly nice part of that is obviously we talked about how his uncle was in the original trilogy, and so now it's carried forward to another generation, which is kind of neat. Yeah.
Well, same thing with Billy Lord, right?
Yeah, although she's not exactly a prominent character in the next trilogy, but I mean, what are you going to do?
No, and it's cool.
So the other thing I wanted to mention, so there's another one of those weird self-promotion things happening next week. So next week is what Netflix is calling Geeked Week. Have you guys seen anything about this? Geeked Week?
Geeked Week?
Yeah,
no, I haven't seen this promotion.
So if you go to Instagram, I think it's probably on the other socials, but you go to Instagram and put in Netflix Geeked, all one word, Netflix Geeked. They are teasing that June 6th to the 10th is Geeked Week. And the feed that's up there is filled with Stranger Things stuff and just, all kinds of, sort of stuff that fits into our milieu. But one of the things that's on there is that it's they are going to announce next week when the start date is for the new Sandman series, and so they're sort of teasing that this is going to be like a week of announcements and shows and stuff. So I'm curious to see what else they've got in mind. So it says June 6th through 10th, Geeked Week 2022, featuring The Umbrella Academy, Sandman, Resident Evil, new episodes of One Piece, The Gray Man, Cyberpunk, Stranger Things. There's sneak peeks, trailers, cast panels, and so much more to get geeked up about. So it seems like next week we'll have some stuff to talk about, because I think we're going to get a little bit of nerd news from Netflix.
Well, next week is WWDC for us, so Jaime and I, we're going to be completely Apple-centric.
Well, I'll take one for the team and try and pay attention to Geek Week for you.
Yeah, I might have some interviews lined up next week. I don't know what's going on with that. I'll try to get them to avoid these 2 days, but we'll see.
I'm surprised you don't have a number one fan down standing over your shoulder while you're doing your end of the recording here.
You know what he's like? Well, the recording is a no-brainer. He's busy upstairs playing with all my HomeKit lights and stuff. And in the middle of the podcast, the lights down here started turning on and off. I'm like, did you do that? Could you do that at a different time, perhaps?
I told him that a while back. He was telling me, he's like, yeah. So grandma, this cool thing you can adjust the lights and stuff like that. I'm like, dude, how is it possible you and I are not pranking my parents all the time by just making their lights come off and
so
on?
I removed him from that a while ago, because there's no point in him doing this stuff. And then so he tells me today, all of a sudden he starts they're talking about because Quinn was trying to turn off some lights. Instead of turning them off, she removed them from the app. Who gives a 7-year-old an app to work with, right? This is why we have passwords. I said the reason why we have passwords is because of your son.
Fair.
We never used to have passwords on our computer, right? But anyway, so yeah, he added himself back into my profile, and off he goes. So Yeah, don't worry. When he leaves,
It all gets reset.
In a couple of days. No, in a couple of days when he leaves, I'll just quietly remove him and not tell, because he gets notifications on his watch when our devices fail. Well, our devices fail because somebody keeps turning them off and unplugging them from the wall.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think that's how it came up, because he was sitting here one day and he got a notification on his watch. He's like, "Oh, Grandpa's thing," and I was like, "So let me get this straight. You can control Grandma and Grandma's lights from our house?" Oh, I sense a great excuse to do like a paranormal haunting video at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Like, just start turning the lights off and on. Start, the sound of rattling chains. We'll just, you guys will think you're in a Scooby-Doo episode.
At the very least, turn off the lights when he's going to be watching like Strange New World or something, and then turn them on, and then make hey, how did it feel when that happened? Was it like feeling the force? The light just turned on. You were bathed in its warmth.
Yeah, that'd work. Yeah, again, it just seems like too good to pass up when you can prank somebody. If you can control over their lights, you just have to,
Anyway, I don't know if you guys heard, but Zoom killed my call again, so I'm going to just drop now, and I'll take whatever you guys just bantered about, and maybe I'll use it, maybe I won't.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Bye. Talk to you next week.
Bye. Next.
Okay.
All right.
Later.
Bye. Guys. Bye.